Chapter 4:15. Being a bodyguard could be considered the job with the least clear price tag in the world. The lowest was a few $1,000s a month, while the highest was $1 million a year. There was no clear price tag. However, Jiang Hai had thought about the problem of hiring bodyguards before, so he went to inquire about it. Nowadays, the top bodyguards in the country had an annual salary of almost $1 million. 2 million or 3 million would be his. And overseas, take Blackwater as an example. Different grades led to different prices. The lowest grade was a C-grade bodyguard, which meant that he had just come out of the Dolphin Special Forces or the Triangle State. Anyone who had undergone basic training would know that Blackwater was made up of 9 parts. Blackwater Training Facility, Blackwater Target System, Blackwater Safety Consulting Company, Blackwater Dog Training Company, Blackwater Airship Company, Blackwater Armored Vehicle Company, Blackwater Maritime Company, Crow Development Group, Blackwater Airborne Division. Different types of training naturally led to different companies. The C-grade bodyguards had just come out of these training companies. Generally, such bodyguards would have an annual salary of about $50,000, but as long as they completed their tasks well, they could be promoted to B-grade. B-grade bodyguards could earn an average of $80,000 a year. Above them were A-grade bodyguards, which were basically the best bodyguards that could be hired, with an annual salary of about $150,000. Above A-grade were S-grade bodyguards, but there were only a few of them. They weren't bounty hunters. These S-grade bodyguards had been hired by the White House or some rich people for a long time, so their prices were naturally different. Jiang Hai's starting salary for Azalina was $100,000. There were a total of 52 weeks in a year, and $2,000 a week. That was more than $100,000 a year, not including the bonus. Including the year-end bonus, it was probably comparable to that of an A-grade bodyguard. Azalina was very satisfied with this annual salary. Of course, she didn't really care about the money. Compared to the money, she was more interested in the identity Jiang Hai gave her and the benefits of living with Jiang Hai. For her, this was the most important thing. Since it had been decided, Jiang Hai didn't say anything. He directly called Mayor Wallace and solved the household registration problem for Azalina. Azalina used to be a blank piece of paper. If she wanted to apply for immigration, it might be a little troublesome. However, Jiang Hai didn't want her to emigrate. It was just an employment contract, which was much simpler. Soon, Mayor Wallace had finalized with Jiang Hai. Azalina was now a Panamanian working in the United States. In this way, the problem of household registration could be easily solved. After solving the biggest household registration problem, Azalina suddenly jumped into Jiang Hai's arms and gave Jiang Hai a kiss. Feeling the softness on his lips, Jiang Hai was stunned. "That's great, boss, I'm yours from now on." Looking at the somewhat stunned Jiang Hai, Azalina said with a smile. Okay, I will leave my safety to you in the future." Looking at the enthusiastic Azalina in front of him, Jiang Hai also said a little woodenly. Looking at him, Azalina chuckled and stood up from the sofa. Looking at Jiang Hai, Azalina smiled, then winked at Jiang Hai and said, "Since I am now the boss's person, I will help the boss solve his trouble." "Trouble? What trouble?" Hearing her words, Jiang Hai's heart thumped, and then his originally somewhat woodenly face became serious in an instant. It seems that this woman is not as silly and sweet as others. She seems to have no desire, but in fact, this woman is not someone to be trifled with. You understand, this is my proof of allegiance. Don't worry, I will not let you down. Looking at Jiang Hai's serious look, Azalina also smiled, and deliberately patted the pistol tied to her leg that she snatched from those people yesterday, and said with a smile. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. Is she really reliable? Forget it, I will take care of these things. You just stay here obediently. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai still rejected her proposal, but Azalina smiled and waved at Jiang Hai. After saying, "See you tomorrow," she left Jiang Hai's villa. When Jiang Hai stood up and wanted to stop her, she had already run away. Looking at her back, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be speechless. At this time, Jiang Hai didn't know what he was thinking. Although he wanted to stop her, he did have such an idea. Because even Jiang Hai didn't have the confidence to retreat under the threat of bullets, he didn't want her to die. But then again, if she can really help me solve the problem, so Jiang Hai was really in a dilemma. Just as he was in a dilemma, Azalina had already left his manor. I hope this matter can be settled. I came here to farm and raise fish. Why are there always so many old things? Seeing that Azalina had left, Jiang Hai also sighed helplessly. To be honest, in addition to the initial anger, Jiang Hai, who had calmed down now, really had a headache because he wasn't a person who liked to fight and kill. He didn't have much ambition for things like power and status, but these people who touched his bottom line, Jiang Hai wouldn't easily let them go. He just hoped that this time, he would make an example of them, and no one would dare to show off next time. But it was estimated that his hope would be difficult to achieve. In this world, there would always be people who wanted to take a bite of fat meat. Thinking of this, Jiang Hai sighed and went to the residential area of Aphrodite and the others. He was too anxious yesterday. Today, he had to comfort these girls, especially Bernice and Lilia. Originally, Jiang Hai thought that these two would leave on the same day when they heard that Jiang Hai's manor was going to be attacked, but he didn't expect that these two didn't leave. Although they were almost scared to tears last night, they still held on strongly. Today, Jiang Hai had to go and see them. Of course, in addition to them, Jiang Hai also had to comfort Delina, Marian, and Aphrodite. When Jiang Hai appeared, these girls who seemed to be quite persistent couldn't help but cry. Even Bernice, who was usually cold and cheerless, was the same. Last night, she was really afraid that she would die like this. But fortunately, under the circumstances, nothing happened to her. But now that she saw Jiang Hai, she still felt wronged, and her tears flowed down. Besides her, the other girls were fine, especially Lilia, who was hiding in a dark room. When she saw Jiang Hai come in, she just hugged Jiang Hai. She didn't cry nor did she say anything. It can be seen that after many years of illness, she had become indifferent to life and death. It was inevitable that she would feel uncomfortable in her heart, but it was still within the scope of her endurance. Delina and the others were also very afraid of death, but they believed that Jiang Hai would come to save them, so they were fine. This time, it could be considered as surviving a disaster. After Jiang Hai comforted them, he specially organized a small party in Aphrodite's small villa. Of course, only Jiang Hai, Delina, Marian, Bernice, Lilia, Aphrodite, Dana, Hilda, Paige, Ohilia, Bridget, and Janice, a total of 15 people. It was indeed a bit crowded here. But they really needed to relax. Just as Jiang Hai and others were discussing surviving a disaster in the manor, Azalina had already gone to Boston, not far from Jiang Hai's manor. After she arrived there, she deliberately parked her car in the parking lot of the North Shore Garden Arena. Although there was no basketball game here today, there was no ice hockey game here. The North Shore Garden Arena was the home of two teams. In addition to the familiar Celtics, there was also the Boston Bruins, a team in the National Hockey League. Ice hockey, like basketball, began in November every year and ended in April of the next year. After the end of April, only the teams that entered the playoffs could play. This year's Bruins had no chance to enter the playoffs, but the Celtics had entered. But unfortunately, they lost to the popular Knights in the end. Now, the Knights and Warriors were competing for the championship, and this place was empty. But although there was no game here, there would still be some tourists and people playing nearby who would come in to take a look. Azalina was the same. She took the money Jiang Hai gave her and specially bought a Celtics uniform. After stuffing some newspapers in it to change her body shape, she left from another door and took a taxi to the South District of Boston. Although nothing would happen to her even if she was seen, after all, she was Jiang Hai's employee. But years of experience made her do this. Indeed, if it came to these things, Belle was far from her opponent. When Jiang Hai and others were preparing dinner at home, gunshots were heard in the South District of Boston. But everyone didn't care too much about the gunshots. After all, where was this? The South District of Boston was a chaotic place. When someone found that someone had died, they began to call the police, but the murderer had already disappeared. On the same day, the 4 felons who were still detained in the Winthrop police station received the news that their family members were shot by unknown people. These people almost cried on the spot and swore to God that Jiang Hai did it. But the person in charge of monitoring Jiang Hai's manor said that except for Moses Adams, no one in Jiang Hai's manor had moved this year. The police didn't know about Azalina's existence. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai's villa came to an end, and he decided to stay at Belle's for the night. Belle also had 2 rooms, so it was naturally not a problem for Jiang Hai to stay there. When Jiang Hai, who was lying in bed, received a text message from Azalina, Jiang Hai smiled. Because there was a number 1 on it, Jiang Hai knew that there was only one goal left. Chapter 4:16. Ta 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 ta. A flurry of footsteps sounded. In a small alley in Boston's South City, a group of people was running fast. The leader accidentally knocked over a trash can, and the people behind him fell down. When these people were covered with garbage and smelly water, these people didn't care. After rolling and crawling from the ground, they quickly ran to a corner next to them and looked behind them in horror. Boss, I can't run anymore, what should I do now? Looking at the person in the lead, a young man next to him was already tearing up. With a sobbing tone, he said to the first person who fell down just now with a pained expression. You ask me what to do? How do I know what to do, shoo? Keep your voice down, don't attract that female devil. Patting the boy's head, the first person who fell couldn't help but say sharply. If there was someone familiar with Billy Wallen here at this time, they may not recognize him. The person who spoke was not someone else, but Billy Wallen, who had a grudge against Jiang Hai. Now he was in a mess, which was completely different from the high-spirited person he was a few days ago. He now understood why the United States was said to be a paradise for the rich, because they really couldn't deal with the rich here. Originally, he thought that with thousands of underlings, he was invincible. As long as he didn't attack the United States government, he could beat up whoever he wanted. But obviously, he thought too much. In the United States, you, a gang leader, want to find trouble with the rich? You are crazy. That night, the revenge came. According to his informant, the backbones and underlings he sent last night were all arrested. The backbones were almost all dead, all the underlings were arrested, and the Boston police also began to seal the block he was in last night and began to seal the bars, casinos, and the like he was responsible for, which made him feel bad. When he wanted to run, he found that all the blocks he was in were sealed, which made him feel even worse. He immediately changed his clothes and used the complicated alleys in Boston's South District to escape. Less than half an hour later, the police broke down the door because his underlings confessed, and then he was scared out of his wits. The entire Southern District was completely sealed off. Whether it was entry or exit, everything was under strict inspection. In every street and alley, the first thing that came out of everyone's mouth when they met was whether they had seen Billy. This scared Billy Wallen out of his wits. He never would have thought that he would end up with no path to heaven and no door to hell just because of his little act. Originally, he thought that no matter how ruthless he was, he would still have a chance to escape like his former boss. But now, not to mention running away, he didn't even have the chance to get on a boat. He was sealed in the South City and couldn't get out at all. The training she received from novels allowed her to kill people without any burden at all. Whether it was the elderly, children, women, or even pregnant women, she would never hesitate to kill them. Not to mention Billy Wallen and the others. If Jiang Hai killed someone in this situation, he would probably have nightmares for many days, plus vomiting and diarrhea. It would take some time for him to get over it. As for Belle, although he was stronger than Jiang Hai, at least he did not have any psychological burden when killing Billy Wallen and the others, but he could not kill some innocent people. On the contrary, Azalina Vicarborio, a woman who had been killing people since she was 12 years old, did not escape from her original organization because she was tired of killing people like Belle. She escaped because she wanted to live. Of course, boredom was also one of the reasons. That was why she escaped. For her, as long as she completed the task, she did not care who she killed and how many she killed. Demon. Seeing Azalina coming out, the eyes of Billy Wallen and the others unconsciously widened. At this time, in their eyes, this female demon was simply the most abominable creature in the world. Thank you for the compliment, who's next? But unfortunately, their words did not make Azalina angry. She did not even have the slightest emotional fluctuation. She just stood there with a smile and mercilessly shot the head of the boy who was crying just now. She then glanced at the others. Wait, you can't kill me. Are you one of Jiang Hai's people? I have something that Jiang Hai wants to know. Seeing that the woman in front of him was looking at him, Billy Wallen yelled in horror like a frightened cat. He then stretched out his hand and gestured for Azalina to wait for a while, and then said quickly, "Don't worry. Sorry, I'm just responsible for killing people. The exchange of information has nothing to do with me." Hearing his words, Azalina shrugged and said to Billy Wallen with a helpless look, then raised her gun again. Wait a minute, Jiang Hai definitely wants to know this information. I'm not the one who wants to deal with him. I'm just a tool in the hands of others. His real enemy is not me, do you understand? Looking at Azalina in front of him, Billy Wallen said anxiously. Sure enough, when she heard that there was someone behind her, Azalina was stunned. In fact, not only Azalina, but Jiang Hai, Moses Adams, and even Murray Smith were also very curious. No matter how arrogant he was, how could a gray boss dare to provoke a rich man like Jiang Hai? Regardless of whether others believed it or not, they did not believe that Billy Wallen could achieve such a scale in half a year, which meant that he was definitely not a fool. However, he did blatantly attack Jiang Hai's manor, and Jiang Hai didn't know how he was going to end it. But as far as the current situation was concerned, he didn't have the ability to end it. Chapter 4:17. Wah, wah. The sound of waves hitting the side of the boat and the shore could be heard. On the endless sea, a small boat was constantly rolling along with the waves. At this time, two people were sitting on the boat. One of them was none other than Azalina Vicabrio, and the other was Billy Wallen. But at this time, Billy Wallen was as embarrassed as he could be. This guy was now covered with wounds all over his body, his face was blue and purple, and his right little finger was missing. It was wrapped with a piece of gauze that didn't look very clean. His two thumbs were tightly tied together by a plastic band used by people who usually assemble computers. His thumb was already purple from necrosis, but he didn't care, and the person opposite him didn't care either. I don't understand, why are you working for a yellow-skinned monkey? As long as you are willing to let me go, I can get you as much money as you want. Looking at Azalina Vicabrio, who was enjoying the sea breeze in front of him, Billy Wallen said with a serious look. Hearing his words, Azalina chuckled softly. She didn't care about this guy's provocative words. After glancing at the man with her beautiful eyes, she looked into the distance. Looking at her appearance, Billy Wallen couldn't help but sigh. It seems that he thought too little. Billy Wallen was caught last night, and he had been in the hands of this woman for a day and half of the night. Of course, he had been tortured for the past 24 hours. When he said that he was not behind the scenes, Azalina immediately reported it to Jiang Hai, but then she didn't stop, she continued to beat him. In her opinion, if she can get information out of him, then she doesn't need to trouble Jiang Hai too much. She can deal with it. But the problem now is that this man knows very well that if he doesn't see Jiang Hai, then he will really die, so even if his little finger was cut off, he didn't say a word. Azalina persisted until this afternoon. Seeing that he really didn't want to say anything, she reported it to Jiang Hai. Secondly, Jiang Hai asked her to buy a boat and drive it to his sea area at night to meet him here. Time passed by minute. At about 11:00 in the evening, the sound of an engine suddenly sounded in this silent world. Hearing this sound, Azalina stood up first and looked into the distance. Then he saw Jiang Hai driving a boat from his manor. According to the signal, after shaking the headlights, he slowly approached. With the help of the moonlight, he also saw the person on the boat in front of him. Is he still not going to say it? Azalina stood up, Jiang Hai asked her. He's so stubborn. Squinting her eyes, Azalina said with a smile on her face, but from her smile, it could be seen that she was not very satisfied with her approach. She was the first one to do a mission, and she didn't even complete it 100%. It was indeed a bit unsightly, but looking at Jiang Hai's expression, she could tell that he was quite satisfied with the completion of this mission. Well, don't worry about it. Patting Azalina on the shoulder, Jiang Hai walked to the boat, squatted down, and looked at Billy Wallen in front of him. Jiang Hai looked at him carefully. It's this guy who almost forced me into a desperate situation twice in a row. Hello, my name is Jiang Hai. If you have something to say, just say it. At this time, looking at this embarrassed guy, Jiang Hai's anger subsided a little. At least he can talk to him quietly. Looking at the white man in front of him, Jiang Hai said indifferently. If I say it, can you save my life? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen raised his head and said with a firm look on his face. If I'm interested in what you say, I promise not to kill you. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai smiled, but it doesn't matter. Jiang Hai spread his hands and said calmly to Billy Wallen. Don't just talk about you, there's also her. At this time, Billy Warren could only believe in Jiang Hai's oath. However, he was still careful enough. He looked at Azalina behind Jiang Hai and said those words. Even if Jiang Hai fell out with him, he wouldn't be able to do anything. She won't either, just say it. Glancing at Azalina behind him, Jiang Hai said calmly. I hope you'll keep your promise. It wasn't my intention to cause trouble for you. No matter how stupid I am, I wouldn't cause trouble for a rich man like you. The reason why I've been keeping an eye on you is because the person behind me wants to cause trouble for you. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, Billy Wallen took himself out of the conversation. He really knows how to talk. That's not what I want to hear. Who is the person behind you? Glancing at Billy Wallen indifferently, Jiang Hai said impatiently. He didn't come to listen to Billy Wallen's story. If he talks nonsense again, he will kill him. I don't know who it is, but the person who contacted me is a group of Wuxia people. They call the boss behind them Young Master. They are very rich, and they should have some power in Wuxia. Originally, they just wanted your life, but then they wanted your cow. Seeing the impatience in Jiang Hai's eyes, Billy Wallen said anxiously. Wuxia people? Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but frown. What's going on? Yes, Wuxia people. I'm very sure. Before I came to Boston, I hung out with the Chinese Grey Gang in New York for a while. Although their accent is a little different, most of them are similar. They don't know that I can understand Chinese, and they called in front of me. They called the person on the other side of the phone as Young Master. Their Young Master seems to live in the capital. Listening to Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen said everything he could to save his life. His face was filled with nervousness, it was very scary. Did they say what their boss was called, and what the boss of that group was called? Looking at Billy Wallen in front of him, Jiang Hai said seriously. To be honest, when he heard what he said, the first enemy he thought of was Qin Fan's father, Qin Tai An. But if it was this guy, the timing didn't seem to match. After all, it was really a long time ago when Billy Wallen first attacked him. At that time, he didn't know Qin Fan. Moreover, after Qin Fan died, Qin Tai An followed him not long after. They didn't have the time to commit the crime. Since it was not the Qin family, to be honest, Jiang Hai really didn't know if he had any enemies in China who wanted to kill him. I don't know who their boss is. I only know that they call their boss Young Master. As for the name of that group of people, I only know the leader. When we first met, he said that his name was Roy Jiang. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen immediately said. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Roy Jiang? Jiang Roy. Americans are troublesome, what else do you know? Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Billy Wallen shook his head helplessly. I only know that they had been living in the XX Hotel in Boston before this, but on the first day of my accident, they had already run away. I called them for help, but at that time, they had already boarded the plane. Looking at Jiang Hai, Billy Wallen said seriously. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai looked at Azalina. It was difficult for Jiang Hai to tell whether this person was telling the truth or not, but Azalina had no problem. He is telling the truth. It seems that he only knows so much. Do you want to? Azalina saw Jiang Hai's gaze and chuckled. After she finished speaking, she made a throat-slitting gesture. You said that you would let me go, please, I just want to live, please. Hearing Azalina's words, Billy Wallen couldn't help but say excitedly. After such a big thing, the only thing he has to do is to live. He doesn't want to die. Don't worry, I'm very interested in what you said, so I won't kill you. Of course, she won't either, but I won't leave this ship here. If you are lucky, swim back. I promise I won't trouble you again. Looking at Billy Wallen, who was scared out of his wits, Jiang Hai smiled faintly, then pulled him up and threw him into the sea. Although his hands were still covered, Billy Wallen grew up by the sea after all. He was a good swimmer. After entering the water, he didn't sink but swam vigorously. Although his physical strength was almost gone now, his willpower to live was stronger than anything else. As long as he was still alive, he had the hope of making a comeback. He must return the humiliation he suffered today in the future. Are you really going to let him go? Looking at Billy Wallen, who swam away quickly after falling into the water, Azalina couldn't help but frown. Chapter 418. This person named Jiang Roy does have a record of entering and exiting the country. The last video was the day before yesterday, which is the day after the incident here. But on the surface, this guy is just a tourist. There is no record to check. While looking at the record of this person named Jiang Roy, Jiang Hai listened to Moses Adams. Today was the third day after Jiang Hai was attacked. On the first day, he was in the police station. On the second day, he didn't know how the news spread. On the same day, a lot of people came to his manor. Zhang Dihai and the others came to visit Jiang Hai. Selena Gomez and Prawalton both called to come over, but they were stopped by Jiang Hai. Are you kidding me? Now, when he sees Selena Gomez and Prawalton, he will still feel awkward. As for other partners, such as Iron Bull and Eva, who sold Jiang Hai's fish seedlings, and Baker Gerard from the research lab, they all called. There were also some who wanted to visit Jiang Hai, but they were all stopped by him. Unknowingly, Jiang Hai did not know that he already had so many friends. In the evening, he went to see Billy Wallen. After returning home that night, he called Moses Adams and prepared to investigate the mastermind behind the scenes. But to be honest, the information about the person behind the scenes was not very good. Because on the surface, this Jiang Roy used to be a soldier in China. He was born in 1973 and became a soldier in 1991. After retiring in 2004, he disappeared for a period of time. It was said that he went to the Middle East to be a mercenary. He returned to China in 2010, and then there was completely no news about him. Until this year, he came to the United States as a tourist. No one knew what he was doing. Only Jiang Hai knew that this guy was here to deal with him. Are you sure this guy is behind the scenes? Moses Adams asked with some doubts as he looked at the family photo. To be honest, it was not difficult to get the information, but he found it hard to believe Jiang Hai's judgment. He shouldn't be the mastermind behind the scenes, but just another knife. Forget it, let's not talk about it. I'll ask around, how is my case going recently? Shaking his head, Jiang Hai looked at Moses Adams and asked. Jiang Hai now had 2 vicious dogs under his command. One of them was Azalina. There's no problem. The witnesses and material evidence are all here. Those who attacked the manor will definitely go in. Those who blocked the way will probably also be arrested, but they won't be sentenced for too long. But for us, as long as we go in, we can take action. After this incident, Jiang Hai's trust in this woman instantly increased from 0 to 80. This has reached the point where Jiang Hai does not doubt the people he uses, and this woman is also worth this line as far as the current situation is concerned. The second vicious dog is Moses Adams. This man is very much in line with Jiang Hai's mind, and he is getting more and more in line with him. He knows when he should do what, and he also knows how to share Jiang Hai's worries. Compared to these, the thing he wanted was money, which Jiang Hai did not lack the least. In fact, in the United States, as long as you have money, you have everything. Jiang Hai has plenty of money, so Moses Adams is quite loyal. Of course, he can't access Jiang Hai's core secrets, which is inevitable, but Jiang Hai is still very calm when he is asked to help clean up and solve some people who can be solved with money. Because this incident is relatively big, it may cost a lot. Looking at Jiang Hai, Moses Adams closed the report in his hand, shrugged at Jiang Hai, and said helplessly. But as soon as his voice fell, Jiang Hai had already picked up his phone and started to operate it. In less than a minute, a text message came on his phone, indicating that $20 million had been transferred to his bank account. The rest is yours. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams's eyes lit up. He likes this kind of generous boss the most. Jiang Hai is really good with money, at least he has never let him down. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Moses Adams also stood up and said respectfully, "Yes, boss, I know what to do." Then, after reporting the situation in the past few days, he took the initiative to leave. After he left, Jiang Hai also took out his cell phone and called Qi Li. This person named Jiang Rui is indeed a little troublesome for Jiang Hai to investigate. But if he let Qi Li wake him up, there may be unexpected gains, so after thinking about it, he called her. "Hello, why are you calling me?" The phone rang less than 3 times before it was picked up, and Qi Li's excited voice came from the other side of the phone. She should be at home now, and there is the sound of TV next to her. "Are you at home?" It is now 8:00 in the morning in Jiang Hai's place, so it is 9:00 in the evening in China. 13 hours earlier, it is Huaxia's time now. "Yeah, I'm watching TV." Listening to Jiang Hai's voice on the phone, Qi Li, who had just taken a shower at home and was watching TV, said with a smile. In recent days, she has been in a very good mood. The beef imported from Jiang Hai has become the main brand of her restaurant as she expected. The best beef in the world. She really wasn't wrong to call it that. Even if it was the best beef in Japan, it might not be as good as Jiang Hai's. She didn't feel any burden to call it that now. Since ancient times, Huaxia has liked to be the middle, and people like to compete for the first place in everything. The world's best beef. Once this brand was out, it naturally attracted a large number of people's attention. After eating it once, they indeed felt that it was delicious. Of course, more people were just following the crowd. How many people could really tell whether the beef was good or bad? In China, there are basically only 4 kinds of beef. Beef brisket is stewed, beef shank is sauced, beef is fried and roasted, and beef offal is boiled. That's all. Not many people know about marbling and eye meat. This time, after Qi Li's explanation, more and more people know about it. Of course, knowing it costs money. A 7.5-ounce Jiang Hai's high-quality steak, about 4.7 pounds, is sold here for 1,488 yuan. You can choose a chef to cook it in front of you on the spot. You can also choose to serve it after it is done. 2 yuan, 1 pound is nearly 3,000 yuan. Of course, the price is RMB. The raw material price of Jiang Hai's beef is more than 2,400 yuan per pound. There is also the cost of labor, restaurant, water, electricity, tax, and some tributes. Selling it at this price is really not a lot of profit, but this kind of price, this kind of service, this kind of beef, the three flavors in one, instantly occupies the top consumer market in Imperial City. During this period of time, all the food and beverage companies chose to avoid anything related to the Qi family's beef for the time being. Some American consortiums saw the business opportunity here, so they wanted to buy it in the United States. However, they found that the Shanghai supermarkets and Walmart Group also have this kind of beef. When they asked about the price, they gave up. The wholesale price of this kind of beef was $420 per pound by the C merchants, and $418 per pound by Walmart. $418 was equivalent to 2,700 renminbi. Including the transportation to China, the rental of the store, the payment of the tribute, the water and electricity, and the rental of the staff, they would lose money if they couldn't sell it for 3,800 renminbi per pound. However, Qi only sold it for 2,976 renminbi. Naturally, they couldn't compete. In this way, the high-end market for this kind of beef quickly closed. Now, the rich people in Imperial City come to eat it almost every day. And the rich people who come to Imperial City from other places have to ask someone to make an appointment if they want to eat a piece of beef. Models, actors, and other people who eat this kind of beef have to post it on Weibo to attract attention. The sky-high price of this kind of beef is also very popular on the internet. Even the media is involved, but there is nothing they can do. Because this kind of beef is traceable. It is not like the sky-high price of prawns or shredded potatoes, which use ordinary ingredients to cheat others. This kind of beef is the best kind of beef in the world. The price is right there, and it is destined that ordinary people can't afford it. Therefore, when the media saw that they can't cheat, they changed the topic and changed it to praise. So Qi has been living very comfortably these days. In the past, when Qi Group was at its peak, not many people paid attention to it. But now, it is different. In just a few days, Qi Group's share price has increased by 20%. Chapter 419. Director Qi. Hello, Director Qi. Good morning, Director Qi. Qi strode confidently in her high heels and walked quickly into the Qi Group building. Everyone who saw her bowed their heads respectfully and greeted her as Director Qi. However, what surprised them was that Director Qi, who usually had a cold face like an iceberg, seemed to have a good heart today. When they greeted her, she would respond with a smile. She even nodded when she saw some familiar faces, which made them feel flattered. Ever since Qi took over the company, her face had always been in a state of deep sorrow. Not to mention nodding and smiling, when she saw someone greet her while walking, she would not even squint her eyes. When she wanted to take the elevator, except for her personal secretary, no one was allowed to accompany her. Of course, she also had a separate elevator, which only stopped at two places, the first floor and the floor of her office, and this elevator was also not allowed to be used by others. If she was a woman in her 40s who was so cold every day, she would probably be called the cruel spinster behind her back. However, Qi was very beautiful and young. She was not even 30 years old, so no one called her the cruel spinster behind her back. Instead, they called her the Scarlet Serpent Fairy. Of course, this was also related to her previous life. However, today, the people in the company felt that their eyes were going blind. The Scarlet Serpent Fairy actually smiled. She actually smiled? The sun must have risen from the west. Many people who saw this muttered in their hearts. Could it be that she was so happy because the Qi Group's restaurant business was doing well recently? Or, was it because she liked them? Of course, most people who thought this way were idiots and overly narcissistic. After all, this was also the first of the three biggest misconceptions in life. Director Qi is in a good mood today. After coming to her office, Qi's assistant, who had been following Qi all the time, didn't have a name until now. Looking at Qi, her assistant asked happily. Yes, let me tell you. Jiang Hai called me yesterday. After hearing her assistant's words, Chi Li sat down in her seat and fiddled with the documents on her desk while speaking mysteriously to her assistant. Hearing Chi Li's words, the assistant couldn't help but be at a loss for words. It seemed that she used to look down on Jiang Hai the most. When Jiang Hai called her, she almost wouldn't pick up. It was because of her attitude that this assistant dared to be so cocky to Jiang Hai. When did Jiang Hai's phone call have such a magical effect? Looking at Chi Li, who seemed to be immersed in happiness, the assistant couldn't help but sigh. If you knew this would happen, why did you do it in the first place? By the way, what about the person I asked you to investigate last night? However, Chi Li didn't care about her assistant's thoughts. After she finished packing, she immediately asked her assistant. As the saying goes, the boss moves his mouth and the subordinate runs his legs. Yesterday, Jiang Hai asked her to investigate the person named Jiang Rui. After receiving the information, Chi Li immediately asked her assistant to start investigating. The first thing she asked at work today was to ask about this. I've already found the information. Just as Jiang Hai thought, the Chi family had worked hard here for so many years, so it was not a problem to get some information. After the assistant finished speaking, she handed the information in her hand to Chi Li. After Chi Li took it, she looked at it. Compared with the information found by Jiang Hai, Chi Li's investigation was obviously more detailed. This Jiang Rui was born in 1973. When he was 18 years old in 1991, because he injured someone, in order to escape the police's pursuit, he spent money to enter the army. He worked in the local army, the permanent army, the border defense force, and the Ace Division. Because he was extremely tough and brave, and he really didn't want to learn, the highest rank he could reach was a sergeant. In 2004, because he hit his boss, he was expelled from the army. Then he entered the Middle East, joined a French mercenary group there, participated in the US-Iraq War, and also went to Afghanistan for a permanent residence. 10 years later, he returned to China. His current job showed that he didn't have a job, but it seemed that he did some private work for others. Chi Li was familiar with these people, because the Chi family also had them, and these people were not assassinating their opponents. In Wuxia, it was important to leave people a way out so that they could meet each other in the future. Therefore, no one would touch the bottom line. However, if the other party were to play dirty, for example, finding a group of people to sit in front of your company or restaurant and not enter, they would just sit there and drink, throwing large beer bottles on the ground. Naturally, no one would dare to go in and eat. At this time, these people would be responsible for driving people away, or doing the same thing for the other party. It seemed that this Jiang Rui was such a person. According to Chi Li's investigation, this person's background seemed to be the Yin family. The Yin family? Looking at the information, Chi Li frowned. This person was related to the Yin family? Yes, we found out that in 1991, the person who helped Jiang Rui escape capture was Andrew Sun's father, and Zheng Jun, so behind him, there is a high possibility that the Yin family is behind him. Also, I recently found some information. This guy just returned from the United States a few days ago, and the most recent news from the United States is that a group of Grey Gang attacked Jiang Hai's manor, but we don't know the specific situation, only that they used guns. Looking at Chi Li in front of her, her assistant also said. What? Jiang Hai's manor? Hearing this, Chi Li was instantly shocked. She immediately picked up the phone and called Jiang Hai. At this time, Jiang Hai had just finished showering and was preparing to sleep in another room in Belle's house. There was no other way, the police hadn't removed the lockdown yet, so Jiang Hai could only go in to take some personal things. If he wanted to remove the lockdown, he would have to wait until the court hearing, which was 15 days. But after 15 days, the lockdown would be lifted, and Jiang Hai would have to renovate it. After all, he didn't have the habit of living in a bullet hole house. Hello? Seeing the phone ring, Jiang Hai picked it up, but just as he picked it up, he heard Chi Li's voice like a firecracker. Listening to her voice, Jiang Hai was confused. You had a shooting there? Are you okay? Are you hurt? I said that the US is too dangerous. Why don't you go back to China? Hey, can you hear me? How come there is no sound after you say hello? Listening to Qi Li's words on the phone, to be honest, Jiang Hai was a little tangled, because he didn't know what to say. I'm fine, and I'm not hurt. I've solved the matter in the US, but I found out that these people may have been instructed by some people in China to attack me, so I want to know who those people in China are. Listening to Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai said faintly. This is a big deal for Jiang Hai. China? The Jiang Rui you asked me to investigate is the mastermind behind the scenes? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but be stunned. No, he is just one of the informants. The mastermind behind the scenes is his family's young master. I don't know who it is, so I asked you to help. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also said slowly. And Zhangwu, you bastard, I must kill you. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's good mood instantly turned bad. She has found out that this Jiang Rui is related to the Yin family. The Yin family's young master is either in Zhangyong or in Zhangwu. No matter who it is, Qi Li can't wait to tear them apart. And Zhangwu? The one you saw during the New Year? Your first boyfriend? Hearing in Zhangwu's name, Jiang Hai froze for a moment, then he remembered the identity of this person, and he couldn't help but be speechless for a while. What first boyfriend? That is my enemy who killed my father. Nothing happened between me and him, we didn't even kiss. Really, I swear. Hearing Jiang Hai's slightly joking voice say the words first boyfriend, Qi Li panicked instantly and immediately said on the phone. Hearing her explanation, Jiang Hai didn't know what to feel. After all, the two were still married on the surface. This state, sigh, it's really hard to say, but after hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai's heart must be a little uncomfortable. No matter what made Jiang Hai so unhappy, then Jiang Hai will kill him. At the same time, because of Qi Li, Jiang Hai also hated her a little. After pondering for a while, Jiang Hai said to Qi Li on the phone, whether there is anything else between you and him, to be honest, it has nothing to do with me. But if you still have him in your heart, then I may be sorry to you. By the way, please tell him that he may be out of luck, because I am going to go back and kill him. After Jiang Hai finished speaking, he hung up the phone directly. As for Qi Li, she sat in the boss's chair with a face full of confusion. Looking at the hung-up phone, she suddenly wanted to cry, but she didn't know how to cry. It seemed that because of her, Jiang Hai was implicated again. Looking at the phone screen, Qi Li immediately called, but unfortunately, the phone was disconnected at this time. She called several times in a row, but it didn't get through. She called again and again, it couldn't get through. She knew that this meant that she was also blacklisted by Jiang Hai. Seeing this, she was even more panicked. She panicked, not because Jiang Hai said that he would come back to kill Zhangwu. Even she wanted to kill him, but because this guy who should have died made the atmosphere between her and Jiang Hai, which had just picked up a little bit, fall below the freezing point again. Quick, check the flights from the United States to the capital immediately. See which flight has Jiang Hai's name in the first-class cabin. Quick. After hanging up the phone, Qi Li immediately shouted to the assistant who was also a little confused. She was really a little panicked. Chapter 420. Jiang, do you really not need us to go with you? Looking at Jiang Hai who was packing his luggage, Moses Adams couldn't help but whisper to Jiang Hai. He was really worried that Jiang Hai would go back like this. Is his safety guaranteed? Don't worry, Azalina is with me, nothing will happen. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai said to Moses Adams. Last night, after receiving a call from Qi Li and confirming who his enemy was, Jiang Hai was ready to set off today. Jiang Hai was never a good person. Generally, he would take revenge on the spot. If the other party ran too far away, then he would take revenge as early as possible. 10 years is not too late for a gentleman to take revenge, but Jiang Hai takes revenge from morning to night. So this time, he was ready to go today and come back early. As for the others, Jiang Hai didn't plan to move. Robbins and the others needed to take care of the ranch, Ai Dehua and the others needed to take care of the fishing ground, and even Aphrodite and the others needed to take care of the winery. Moses Adams had more things to do. He needed to deal with the tourism in Winthrop Town, and he also needed to deal with the problem of those people. Jiang Hai said that he wouldn't let them come out after they went in, and he really had to do it. People like him are the most trustworthy. It's not that he doesn't have compassion, but it depends on who it is for. Jiang, let's go together. Looking at Jiang Hai, who was packing his things, Daliana and Marian also stood up. To be honest, the two girls were a little worried that no one would take care of their nominal father. Oh, that's fine too. Hearing Daliana and Marian's words, Jiang Hai froze for a moment. Then he thought about it. Now that these two girls have been adopted by him for a while, it's time to take them back to see what Wuxia is like. After all, this was his home. Although his daughter was not related by blood, he should at least know. As for the danger, Jiang Hai was not worried. The country was not a tiger's den. This time, Azalina was there, so he did not need to worry too much. As for the two of them, he could protect them. Jiang, although I don't know why you're going to Wuxia this time, I feel that you might get into some trouble. If I can't leave here, you can take Penelope with you. After hearing that Jiang Hai was going to take Delina and Marian, Moses Adams hesitated for a second before telling Jiang Hai. After hearing his words, Jiang Hai became stunned for a second. Penelope was Penelope Daller, Burke Daller's daughter. Jiang Hai had met her several times, but it was not a pleasant meeting. Therefore, Jiang Hai did not know much about this woman. But as Moses Adams said, with Jiang Hai's current identity, he could not avoid some trouble. It was still very useful to have a lawyer with him. Besides, it was just one more person, so he did not care. Okay, then I'll take her. During my absence, you have to take care of my manor. Hearing Moses Adams' words, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment, then nodded hard. Seeing that Jiang Hai agreed, Moses Adams was relieved. Then he called Penelope Daller. When she came, Jiang Hai also packed up the things he was going to take. It was convenient to have money. He did not need to bring too many things back to China. A few pairs of underwear, a change of clothes, and a mobile phone charger. That was all. He did not need to bring anything else, because he could buy them at any time in China. Things that could be bought in the United States could also be bought in China. It was just that the price was cheap and expensive. However, Jiang Hai was not short of money. Probably because of Jiang Hai's temperament, the three girls who were going to go with him did not bring too many things. 4 people and 4 bags, that was all. At the same time, Jiang Hai called the American Express. Don't forget, he was a Centurion Black Gold VIP with hundreds of millions of savings. If he wanted to book a ticket, he could book it at any time and any place. He booked 5 first-class tickets to the capital as soon as possible, and then he waited for Penelope Daller's arrival. Fortunately, this woman was also very capable. She quickly packed up her things and drove over. When she saw Burke Daller again, she was really at a loss. To be honest, she now believed that her father could make a lot of money with Jiang Hai, because her father had given her a lot of money. Although she didn't want the money and wanted to return it to her father didn't care, because he had already proved that he could also make a lot of money in the way of raising cattle with his own ability. Therefore, when she looked at Jiang Hai now, she was not as hostile as before. Instead, she was a little embarrassed. Now that everyone is here, let's go. Seeing that Penelope had also come, Jiang Hai said this and then drove his shield to the New York airport. There was no direct flight to Wuxia in Boston. Instead of waiting at the Boston airport to get on the plane to New York, it was better to drive there directly. To be honest, it was much faster than taking a plane. A few hours later, Jiang Hai and the others arrived at the New York airport. After parking the car in the airport parking lot, Jiang Hai took the 4 beauties into the airport's VIP waiting room. After a short while, a special flight attendant came to remind him that it was time to board the plane. Since Jiang Hai spent so much money, the plane he took naturally would not be bad. With the best plane and the most expensive ticket, not only did Jiang Hai and the others have an independent space where they can lie down or sit, each person has a seat, but the plane also has a network, which is directly connected to the satellite. They can use it to surf the internet or play games to pass the time. Of course, the speed is definitely not fast. At the same time, everyone had a separate TV that could play movies and the like. Of course, there were also separate places like the Sky Bar, where they could not drink and play, but to gather and chat together. However, Jiang Hai had never been there before. He was only one person, so why would he go there? Of course, this was only unique to first-class flights. Ordinary economy and business cabins did not have it. Moreover, they could order food, drink, and even have a separate space. There was a row of bunks like the upper, middle, and lower bunks on the train to sleep. Of course, in fact, these bunks were not very comfortable, especially for people who were too big. Jiang Hai was obviously familiar with this plane. After all, he had sat in this plane 4 times. However, the other women were still a little scared of this luxurious first-class cabin, but Delina and Marian were still fine. Azalina and Penelope, on the other hand, had been looking around curiously ever since they boarded the plane. Not long after, the flight attendant came over and indicated that they were ready to take off. In the United States, different airlines had different requirements. Some airlines required that the plane be turned off when taking off and landing, but it could be used in the air, but it had to be in flight mode. Some airlines could directly turn on flight mode to use mobile phones in the air, and there was no need to turn off the phone. This was because the interference wave emitted by mobile phones only interfered with the base station on the ground, and it had nothing to do with the plane. Unlike in China, as long as you get on the plane, you are not allowed to use your mobile phone. Flight mode, in fact, was not useful in China. Now, Jiang Hai and the others were sitting in the plane. They were not allowed to turn on their mobile phones during takeoff and landing. Therefore, the flight attendant came over and gestured for everyone to turn off their phones. But just as everyone was about to turn off their phones, a voice came from Jiang Hai's side. Everyone looked over and saw a very fat guy talking loudly on the phone. "Hey, you can rest assured. I'm on the plane now. I'll arrive in the capital tomorrow. When the time comes, I'll help you return those things. Don't worry, the goods I sell will definitely not be a loss to you." Listening to him talking, the people next to him couldn't help but frown. They had to admit that in foreign countries, these Europeans and Americans didn't have a good first impression of Wuxia, just like now. Under the repeated reminders of the flight attendant, the fat guy turned off his mobile phone, but his face was slightly embarrassed. After making sure that he turned off his mobile phone, the flight attendant left his position and prepared to take off. After the fat guy watched the flight attendant leave, he couldn't help but turn his head to Jiang Hai's side. "Hey, buddy, I said that this old American plane is strict enough. They even watched me turn off my mobile phone." Listening to the other party's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. If you weren't so ignorant, why would they watch you turn off your mobile phone? But what surprised Jiang Hai even more was how this guy concluded that he was Wuxia. "How do you know that I am Wuxia?" Looking at the fat guy, Jiang Hai asked strangely. "Hey, Wuxia people have a sense of righteousness." Hearing his words, Jiang Hai chuckled. What kind of righteousness is this? These words were just to fool them. Those little Qing, he wasn't young anymore. Would these words work on him? Well, actually, when you turned off your mobile phone, it showed simplified Chinese. Let me introduce myself. My name is Wang Yang. I am in the jewelry business. You can call me Fatty Wang. Brother, where did you get rich? Seeing Jiang Hai's gaze, the guy named Fatty Wang smiled embarrassedly, but thinking that there was still a 13-hour flight, he would suffocate if he didn't speak. My name is Jiang Hai. I opened a manor in Boston to raise cattle. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also chuckled and said indifferently. He now likes to say that he raises cattle or fish. As for whether this will make others look down on him, Jiang Hai doesn't care. He doesn't live in the eyes of others. They can think whatever they want. What does it have to do with Jiang Hai? Raising cattle? It seems that the manor should be large. However, Fatty Wang did not laugh at Jiang Hai, but said with a smile. Chapter 421. Hearing the fat man's words, Jiang Hai couldn't help but laugh. How did he see through it? How did you know? Looking at the fat man, Jiang Hai couldn't help but turn around and said with a serious face. The two girls behind you came with you, right? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, the fat man couldn't help but point at Daliana and Marian, who happened to be sitting behind Jiang Hai, with his mouth, and said with a smirk on his face. Both of them are my daughters. Hearing his words, Jiang Hai also glanced back and didn't find any expensive clothes on Daliana and Marian. These two were the same as Jiang Hai. They usually didn't recognize any brands. As long as they thought the clothes looked good, they would buy them. They weren't people who would change themselves because of clothes. So, while their clothes weren't cheap, they weren't luxury goods either. Each piece of clothing cost around $100, which wasn't cheap when converted to RMB. But in the United States, this price was indeed not expensive. Now the clothes they were wearing were a loose chiffon top and a pair of tight jeans, which showed off their long legs. They were wearing a pair of flat canvas sneakers. It was very simple, but Jiang Hai hated wearing sneakers the most. On the contrary, they liked it very much. Just from the way they were dressed, it was really hard to tell that these two girls were rich. Oh, I don't know what clothes they are wearing, but I am a gem merchant. The bracelets they are wearing are not cheap. They can be sold for 100 or 200,000 yuan in China. Looking at Jiang Hai, Fatty Wang said excitedly. Sure enough, when Jiang Hai looked back, he found that the diamond bracelets on the wrists of the two girls were still shining. This bracelet was given to them by Qi Li. Maybe women are naturally interested in shiny things. Therefore, both Delina and Marian liked this bracelet very much. However, they were usually reluctant to wear it. They only wore it today when they went out. However, compared to their clothes, this bracelet was indeed a bit too flashy. The main diamond of this bracelet seems to be above 70 points because of the fiery color, and the other diamonds are above 30 points because of the light. The connection should be platinum, which was specially designed, so the price of this bracelet is definitely not cheap. Facing Jiang Hai, the fat man said with a serious face. He had to admit that this world was really full of experts. If you asked Jiang Hai to understand this, he wouldn't understand it. But this Fatty Wang did know these things very well. Diamonds were mainly about 4C, but when the other 3 Cs were about the same, the last 3 Cs, weight, was the most important thing. Diamonds that were less than 30 points were really not necessary to be used as ring faces or the like. Among the diamonds, only when the diameter of a single diamond was more than 4.5 millimeters and the weight was more than 0.3 carats, could it show a strong light, that is to say, it could dazzle people. When it reached 70 points, that was more than 0.7 carats, it would show a fiery color. Jiang Hai didn't know what a fiery color was, he just heard these people talking about it, that's all. It seems that you know a lot about these things. Why did you come to the United States this time? Listening to Fatty Wang's endless speech, Jiang Hai also nodded. He did learn something. Anyway, he had nothing to do here, so he asked him this question. I'm a jewelry dealer, I specialize in running back and forth between Western countries and our country to make some money. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Fatty Wang said that Westerners and Easterners had different aesthetic standards, and they liked different things. In addition to gold, which everyone liked, there was a saying in China that gold had a price, but jade had no price. So in China, the real value was jade, and in foreign countries, it was gemstones. Fatty Wang's job was to get some gemstones in China, sell them in the United States or Europe, and then get some jade from Europe and the United States, and sell them in China. Although this thing was not produced in China, the best jade was naturally in Southeast Asia. However, it was not that there were no mines in Europe and the United States, but this thing could not be sold at a high price locally. It was naturally the best result for him to buy it. In the following time, he began to popularize the relationship between gemstones and jade to Jianghai. Among the 5 most precious gemstones in the world, the most expensive one was of course diamonds. Colored diamonds of more than 5 carats could not be seen in physical stores, and could only be seen in auction houses. Thinking back, Jianghai had made a fortune with colored diamonds. In addition to diamonds, the second most expensive gemstone was ruby, the third was sapphire, the fourth was beryl, and the fifth was gold and emerald. Of course, the lower the price, the cheaper it was. For example, a recently famous ruby ring called Burmese Starlight weighed 19 carats and was encrusted with diamonds. The reference price was only $45,000. A 19-carat diamond could not be bought even with a zero behind it. Rubies were mainly divided into Burmese red, Mozambique red, and Starlight red. Among them, Pigeon Blood red, the best one in Burmese red, was $6,000 per carat. Mozambique red was more expensive, and those above 3 carats could even be sold for $18,000 per carat. It was really famous in Europe. Starlight red was the cheapest. A carat was between $700 and $1,400, and the best one could hardly be sold for $3,200 per carat. Of course, in Jianghai's view, these things were almost the same. The sapphire, beryl, and gold and emerald were cheaper. Sapphire and the like were also produced in China, and the price was not high. Is yours gold and emerald, too? Listening to Fatty Wang's introduction for a long time, Jianghai also looked at his wrist, where he also wore a string of chains, but this string of chains was colorful, with red, yellow, blue, green, and all kinds of colors. Seeing this guy talking so enthusiastically, Jianghai could not help but ask him. "Oh, no, mine is tourmaline." Fatty Wang heard Jianghai's words and said to him with a smile. "Tourmaline?" Hearing his words, Jianghai was stunned again. What the hell is tourmaline? Tourmaline is still very valuable in our country. Of course, it is far worse than the 5 gems above. It was not valuable originally. In 10 years, it was sold for 400 renminbi per gram. It was a gram, not a carat. But in recent years, it is said that the Empress Dowager of the Qing dynasty liked this thing very much, so the price doubled. Now the best one is sold for tens of thousands of RMB per gram. I came here this time mainly to buy this thing. Seeing that Jianghai did not understand, Fatty Wang said again. Speaking of tourmaline, this kind of thing was really worthless. Before the Ming dynasty, this kind of thing should have no value at all. But in the Qing dynasty, at first, it was worn by the officials. It was often seen in TV series before. When the emperor was angry, he said that he would take off the official's crown. The crown referred to this kind of thing. In the later period, because Cixi liked it, it was also very popular among the nobles of the Qing dynasty. But this thing was produced everywhere in the world. Except in Wuxia, it could be sold for some historical reasons, but it was not valuable abroad. This thing was produced in Kenya, China, Madagascar, Mozambique, Namibia, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Italy, the United States, Burma, Brazil and some countries in South America. Wuxia, Xinjiang, Nanyuan, Mongolia and other provinces also produced it, and the output was not small. So it was not realistic to expect it to be sold at the same price as diamonds. So abroad, this thing was worth more than $10 per gram, but in China, as long as the quality was good, dozens of US would be worth at least 2 zeros. Hearing this, Jianghai could not help but be surprised. He did not expect these things to be so valuable. This is the green ghost in the tourmaline. If I sell it in China, it will be worth hundreds of thousands of US dollars, but I buy it in the United States. It only costs 1,000 US dollars, and it is still good. Looking at the shocked expression on Jiang Hai's face, the fat man didn't show off his wealth. Instead, he proudly showed it off. He took out a dark green zodiac symbol that he always wore on his chest and showed it to Jiang Hai. To put it bluntly, he was not afraid that Jiang Hai would do this business, because this kind of business was not something that anyone could do. First of all, you had to have a place to buy these things in the United States. Chapter 422. Wu. As the plane whistled and landed on the runway of the Imperial Capital Airport, two people were standing there anxiously at the pickup aisle, looking at these two people. Originally, other people who came to pick them up would glance at them from time to time. The men looked at them because these two women are really beautiful. They are really tall and have long legs. Coupled with their office lady clothes, they look extremely attractive. If it weren't for the innate cold appearance of these two women, there would definitely be a lot of people coming to hit on them. Even so, from time to time, there will be a person who will take the initiative to walk past them and take a look at them. At the same time, he will show off his masculine body, trying to get the phone number of these two women. But unfortunately, these two women have no interest in other people around them. As for the women who looked at these two people, they have different thoughts. Some people are secretly cursing these two vixens in their hearts. Some people are envious of the clothes they are wearing, the jewelry they are wearing, and the bags they are carrying. Because in the eyes of these gold diggers, the things on these two women add up to almost 1 million. 1 million. It's just a thought. Just when the men were in love and the women were jealous, they saw the plane they had been waiting for a long time officially landing. Seeing this, the faces of the two women became more anxious. They looked at the exit with a serious face, waiting for the arrival of the group of people they are going to pick up. It has to be said that sometimes, there will always be some people who feel good about themselves. Looking at these two women, other people can feel the cold aura on their bodies. They are clearly not here to make friends, but there are always some people who are exceptions. Hey, beauty, add me on WeChat. Just when the two of them were anxiously looking at the international exit, a slightly flirtatious voice came from the side. Then, a guy with a slick face flashed in front of the two of them and said with a confident face, "Get lost." But unfortunately, these two people don't have time to pay attention to him now. The leader of the two women said with a cold face, "Hey, stop pretending, let's make friends." However, that person clearly has no intention of retreating. Instead, he continued to stand there and said with a smirk on his face. Obviously, this guy has been flirting with girls for a long time. He won't back down just because of this sentence. I'll say it again. Get lost. Looking at this guy, the woman in front of him couldn't help but frown. Her face turned cold, but the man in front of her didn't care and continued to talk. Let me introduce myself. My name is Dong Shanha, and my father is Dong XX from XX province. Does it sound familiar? My father is the richest man in our province, and he is also a member of the National People's Congress. This time, he is going abroad for business, and I am here to pick him up. But if the two of you want to get to know my father, I can introduce you to him, but after you meet him, you have to accompany me to have some fun. The greasy-haired fella said with a smile as he looked at the two women before him. Upon hearing his words, the expressions of the two women turned even uglier. They really hadn't looked at the almanac recently. They really met all kinds of people. Just when they were being pestered by this guy and had no way to leave, the figure they had been waiting for a long time finally came out of the exit, but to their surprise, there were 4 women who came out with him. Yes, the people who came out were none other than Jiang Hai and the others, and the people waiting for Jiang Hai were none other than Qi Li and her assistant. When she saw Jiang Hai come out, Qi Li immediately waved her arm at Jiang Hai, but Jiang Hai acted as if he didn't see it and left from another exit. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Qi Li couldn't help but be speechless. She subconsciously wanted to chase after him, but the man in front of her blocked her way. Get lost. Qi Li said this word for the third time. In addition to anxiousness, there was already some anger in her eyes. I won't, otherwise, you can add me on WeChat, and I will let you go. Looking at Qi Li's flustered and exasperated look, the man said with a complacent look, as if he had already eaten Qi Li. But unfortunately, he thought that Qi Li was too harmless. Looking at the man in front of her, Qi Li went up and kicked this guy's calf heavily. In an instant, this guy held his leg and tilted to the side. Qi Li also took her assistant and ran quickly to Jiang Hai, and finally stopped Jiang Hai at the exit. Huh, Jiang Hai, did you see me just now? You saw me, and you still want to leave? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with some gasps, and hearing her words, Jiang Hai also looked at her calmly. Oh, I saw you, but weren't you talking to that kid? Who is that kid? Your new boyfriend? Looking at the guy who was still holding his leg and jumping in the distance, Jiang Hai said calmly. Yeah, Jiang Hai, I only have you as my husband, no matter if you believe it or not. Oh, forget it, let's go back first, okay? Looking at Jiang Hai's stubborn look, Qi Li was really going crazy. How can this guy be so stubborn? But now is not the time to talk about this, so Qi Li pulled Jiang Hai and wanted to leave first. Oh, we have already booked the hotel, and the hotel car should be outside. However, Qi Li pulled Jiang Hai, but she didn't move. Jiang Hai just stood there and continued to say indifferently. Do we have to be like this between us? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but tremble. She looked at Jiang Hai's eyes with a serious face and said word by word. Jiang Hai's current attitude really made her feel that she was going crazy. There doesn't seem to be any relationship between us, oh, a cooperative relationship. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai said calmly. Well, you can say what kind of relationship it is. If you don't want to go home with me, you can go to the hotel, but you can't be naive to think that you can solve in Changwu by coming here yourself, you still need my help. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with a serious face. She was really speechless with Jiang Hai. This guy is a stone in the toilet, smelly and hard. Forget it, what if you help your first love at the critical moment, then wouldn't I be digging my own grave? Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai smiled, then shook his head, directly bypassed Qi Li and walked out. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Qi Li really opened her mouth wide this time, but she didn't know what to say. President Qi, what should we do now? Seeing Jiang Hai walking out, Qi Li's assistant asked Qi Li with a face full of grievances. She was complaining for Qi Li, because she knew that Qi Li and Changwu didn't have any relationship. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were like fire and water now, but Jiang Hai's attitude towards Qi Li really made her feel that it was not worth it for Qi Li. Let's go and follow him. Feeling her assistant's emotions, Qi Li took a deep breath. After suppressing the trace of unhappiness in her heart, she took the initiative to follow Jiang Hai out of the airport. She got into the car and followed Jiang Hai's car all the way to the city. The car drove by the Peninsula Hotel to pick them up. The hotel Jiang Hai checked in this time was the Peninsula Hotel near the prince's mansion in the center of the capital. This hotel was a hotel in Hong Kong, and it was a good place in the neighborhood. Jiang Hai booked a total of 4 suites here, one for himself, one for Delina and Marion, one for Azalina, and one for Penelope Doll who followed them. After arriving at the hotel, they got their keys and went straight upstairs. After telling the 4 girls that he would treat them to a meal later, Jiang Hai went back to his room to take a shower and relax, but before he took off his clothes, someone knocked on his door. He opened the door and found that the person standing in front of him was none other than Qi Li. Why did you follow me here? Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai was stunned. She was very different from the President Qi in his impression, who could not bear any grievance. His tone was so harsh, so she should have gone back long ago. I don't care what you say, but I have to say it clearly. I don't care what you think. I have to make it clear that Zhangwu and I used to be friends, but nothing happened between us. You know what happened after we returned to China. He and I are enemies now, and I can't wait to bite him to death. What happened to you this time was indeed because of me. Chapter 423. Looking at the crazy Qi Li in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but be at a loss for words. In fact, in his opinion, a breakup between him and Qi Li was inevitable. After all, this meant that the old him died and the new him was reborn. So, from the beginning, he didn't intend to have too much interaction with Qi Li because the two of them were not the same kind of people. And to be honest, he didn't consider the problem of whether Feng Yunshen and Ai Xiaoxi needed protection in the country. Because if they couldn't survive, they could just go to his place. He couldn't be more happy. But now that Qi Li said this, Jiang Hai didn't know what to say. He didn't know when it started. Maybe it was after he saved her from the mountain lion's mouth, but her indifferent feelings towards him seemed to have gradually changed. She might have feelings for him. Jiang Hai also thought about it before, but as soon as it popped up, he erased it. After all, he had always been very dull when it came to feelings. He didn't want to think too much about it. After all, he fell on this woman's body before, and it was quite painful. Previously, it was said more than once that Jiang Hai was a timid person. As long as someone hurt him once, he would never get close to her again in his life. It didn't matter if he was narrow-minded or not, this was Jiang Hai, a living Jiang Hai. His way of protecting himself was to use violence to curb violence. When violence couldn't achieve his goal, he would stay away from the other party. But now, in front of him, Qi Li threw this confession in his face. It was Jiang Hai's turn to be embarrassed. In short, you can't just go to him like this. We still need to think about it. The country is different from foreign countries. There are too many implications in doing things. Pulling out a carrot will not only create a hole, but it may also create a field. The network of relationships is too complicated. If you just jump in rashly, you will suffer. Looking at Jiang Hai's embarrassment, Qi Li's face couldn't help but blush. After her outburst, her mentality calmed down a lot. She took a deep breath and then slowly began to speak to Jiang Hai. She knew that only at this time, Jiang Hai would listen to her. Once it's done, I'll leave. At worst, I won't come back in the future. Looking at Qi Li, Jiang Hai said calmly. You can't leave just because you want to. The Yin family's power is much more powerful than you think. Don't be fooled by the fact that they only run a restaurant. If they want to do business safely in the capital, there must be a lot of big shots above them, especially in restaurants. They have too many connections with people from all walks of life. Maybe the moment you make a move, they will have already cancelled your passport. Where can you go by then? Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said seriously. When Jiang Hai heard her words, he couldn't help but be a little speechless. Suddenly, he felt that he seemed to have brought too many people. He should have only brought Azalina here. If something happens, she naturally has the ability to protect herself, and Jiang Hai can directly go into the sea and tame a shark or something, then he can swim back to the United States. But now he has Delina, Marion, and Penelope Doll with him. If something really happens, it will be a very troublesome thing for him. It's getting late, let's go for a meal. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to really listen to her, Qi Li couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. As long as Jiang Hai listened to her, it was a good thing for her. At least Jiang Hai wouldn't be in danger. At the same time, she also felt that the relationship between her and Jiang Hai was slowly moving forward. Phew. Let's go, I'll call them. Let's have a buffet downstairs. Such a 5-star hotel naturally had a buffet. For the average working-class family, spending more than 200 yuan per person for a meal was indeed a rather inappropriate thing to do. For example, Jiang Hai's group of 6, oh no, and Qi Li's assistant, that's 7 people, adding up to more than 1,000 yuan. But for Jiang Hai, more than 200 yuan per person is actually not expensive, especially with his current wealth. My family runs a restaurant. What are you eating here for? Let's go to the restaurant. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li glanced at Jiang Hai. It's not that she doesn't want Jiang Hai to spend this money. With their wealth, they really don't care about 1,000 or 800 yuan. However, Jiang Hai's first meal back in China is not in her family's restaurant, which makes her somewhat uncomfortable. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai also nodded. Since she said so, then let's go. Then he called the other 4 girls. The 4 girls were a little surprised that Jiang Hai and Qi Li were standing together. Because they were clearly quarreling just now, how come they made up now? They can't guess Jiang Hai's thoughts. But whether it's Delina, Marian, Azalina, or Penelope, these people know when to say what. So they didn't say much, but followed Jiang Hai downstairs again and went to the door. Qi Li's assistant has been waiting for a long time. She specially arranged 2 cars, one for Jiang Hai, Qi Li, and herself, and the other for the 4 girls. Jiang Hai didn't say anything about this arrangement, he just stepped directly into the car. But when they were driving, the atmosphere in the car was obviously very awkward. Jiang Hai didn't have anything to say to Qi Li, and Qi Li didn't know what to say to Jiang Hai. The atmosphere in the car was awkward and strange. But fortunately, the restaurant wasn't far from the hotel. After about 10 minutes of driving, they arrived. After getting out of the car, Jiang Hai looked at the restaurant in front of him and couldn't help but secretly nod. He has to admit that Qi Li does have a way of doing business. Under the background of the current environment, the imperial court is very strict with public funds and so on. This has almost cut off more than 70% of the customer flow. But Qi Li's high-end Western restaurant is not like other restaurants at this time. Instead, its business is very good. In the parking lot in front, there are all kinds of cars parked. Inside the restaurant, there is naturally a lot of people. If other restaurants see this, they will probably curse on the street. But the people who really know the business know that Qi Li's restaurant is popular for a reason. Raw materials. This was the biggest difference between Qi Li's restaurant and other restaurants. The top-grade ingredients in other restaurants were basically stir-fried. For example, some brands of white wine would be sold at a different price if they were sold outside. For example, lobsters, which are sold for dozens of yuan outside, are sold for hundreds of yuan here. Some people say that this is selling for money. But for most people who spend their own money, why should they charge more than 10 times, or even dozens of times more for their skills? They won't do this. So after the imperial court ordered a crackdown, these restaurants don't have a good life. But the steak in Qi Li's restaurant is the best steak. You can't buy it in other places no matter how much money you spend. The best beef in the world, at least in China, was the only one. Some people went to the United States and found that the price of the same beef was not much different. This made the original mentality of the people in China gradually calm down. This was the real thing. They, the rich people, also felt comfortable with spending money to eat. This was the biggest difference between Qi Li's restaurant and other restaurants. The meat is good. This is the hard truth. In fact, not only the rich people like to come here, but also some gold-collar and white-collar workers who have some spare money like to come here. Of course, they can't afford such expensive steaks, but some other food is also good for them. In addition, there are many people who come here to raise their status or to show that they have better taste. Recently, they will also come here. Of course, they come here because there are spendthrifts paying for them. Some famous socialites will even be given a commission by Qi Li. This is all money. It is precisely because of these reasons that this restaurant is now full of people coming and going, and it is lively. Please, I have arranged a place. After seeing the slightly surprised look in Jiang Hai's eyes after getting out of the car, Qi Li's mouth curved into a rare smile. She raised her chin and showed the posture of a queen again. Then, she stretched out her hand and led Jiang Hai and the others into the restaurant. But just as they walked in, they happened to see a group of people going out. Most of these people were Wuxia people. Although the weather outside in June was already quite hot, these people were all wearing suits and ties. They were meticulously dressed from head to toe, so they didn't feel hot at all. Among them, there are some foreigners. These people are obviously from the Arabian region because the man in the lead is wearing a traditional Arabian white robe, talking and laughing with the people around him. When Jiang Hai and this person met, both of them were obviously stunned. Then, the Middle Eastern man stretched out his hand and walked over happily. As he walked, he said, "Hi, Jiang Hai, my friend. I didn't expect to see you here." Seeing the Middle Eastern man coming over, Jiang Hai also walked over with a smile, and the two hugged. "I am from Wuxia. It is not strange to see me here, but I am still very curious to see you here, Defayman Weiha." Looking at the person in front of him, Jiang Hai also said with a smile. Yes, the person in front of him is none other than the Middle Eastern tycoon, a member of the royal family of Dubai, Defayman Weiha Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. Of course, Jiang Hai can't remember so many names, it's like a scam, just call me Defayman. I have nothing to do now, so I run around the world. Wuxia has a long history, so I am still very interested in this place. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Defayman said with a smile. Jiang Hai couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It is a benefit for Jiang Hai that he doesn't have to call him by his full name. Of course, if he kept writing his full name, it would be a piece of cake for him to write the story. Although he was rich, he was also rich. What was the use of having so much money? If he had enough to spend, he wouldn't have enough. So after saying goodbye to Defayman, he walked into the restaurant. However, Jiang Hai didn't notice. While he was greeting Defayman, the person beside Defayman had been staring at him the whole time. Some people even began to search for something with their mobile phones. It was understandable. A person who was so close to Defayman couldn't be treated carelessly. After the two separated, a middle-aged man who had been accompanying Defayman made a gesture. Then, a young man quietly left the group and walked into the restaurant. However, at this time, Jiang Hai had already walked into the restaurant with Qi Li. Qi Li had already arranged everything here. As soon as they walked in, a waiter deliberately led them to a special room on the side. Although most of the restaurant had small partitions, there was also a private room. Inside the private room, there was a huge square table. In the middle of the table, there was a special place for the chef to cook. Here, the main dish was Western food, steak, and teppanyaki. You can choose Western food or teppanyaki, after all, both of these dishes were quite good. After Jiang Hai and the others sat down, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 40s walked into the middle of the table and began to prepare the dishes. This is Master Zhang Deqing, the best Western food chef and teppanyaki chef in China. I specially hired him from Japan. Seeing Jiang Hai's slightly curious gaze, Qi Li said with a smile. The man also nodded gently to Jiang Hai. Without saying much, he began to cook. Although the portion was for 7 people, the chef's cooking was really good. He was very fast. Soon, the beef and seafood prepared by Qi Li were divided into 7 portions. After cooking, they were placed on their respective plates. To be honest, this was the first time that Jiang Hai ate his own beef on teppanyaki, so he was a little curious. Jiang Hai didn't need to do anything because there was a prepared black pepper sauce on it. He put a piece of beef into his mouth. The moment his teeth touched the beef, the juicy taste of Jiang Hai's beef, coupled with the fresh taste of the grass, the taste of the beef, and the abundance of spiritual energy, instantly filled Jiang Hai's mouth. It's worthy of being my beef. Narrowing his eyes, he quickly chewed this piece of beef into pieces and threw it into his stomach. Jiang Hai couldn't help but let out a long sigh of satisfaction. He suddenly realized that he was really wasteful in the past. Although he knew that Jiang Hai's beef was so good, he really didn't expect it to be so good. In the past, Jiang Hai's beef could be rated 90 points by himself. He was very afraid that he would be too proud, so he deducted it. Now he realized that beef could be rated 100 points, but the beef he made could only be rated 70 points. As for the beef made by a professional chef, it could be rated 120 points. This was the difference. It seems that after going back, I have to consider hiring a professional chef. Narrowing his eyes, Jiang Hai whispered in a low voice. I know. Teacher Xanthi's father is a professional French chef. You can ask him to cook. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Marian immediately raised her hand and looked at Jiang Hai seriously. Hearing her words, Jiang Hai touched his chin. If it was really possible for him to get together with Cindy Clive, asking his father-in-law to come over and cook, it didn't seem too good, because Jiang Hai didn't seem to be a good man. Seeing his father-in-law in the villa all day long, Jiang Hai would also feel uncomfortable. In this world, not only the relationship between mother-in-law and daughter-in-law was not good, but the relationship between son-in-law and father-in-law was also not good. Cough, if you feel good, I can help you keep an eye out. However, the person who was more nervous was not Jiang Hai, but Chi Li. No joke, she also knew who Sh20 Clive was. Although the two had not met, they both knew each other's existence. Why didn't Chi Li show too much hostility to Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunchen, but only gently beat them? This was because she knew that it was impossible for these two women to climb up the ranks and become official servants. To put it bluntly, these two women were concubines in ancient times. Perhaps they couldn't even be considered concubines. They were just maidservants in the same room. Such women were destined to be unable to compete with her for the position of wife, but Sh20 Clive was different. If Jiang Hai really had something to do with her, then maybe he wouldn't have anything to do with it. Well, it tastes good. Can you tell me about the Yin family? At this time, Jiang Hai obviously did not want to say too much in this regard. After all, he was not very close to Sh20 Clive recently, and he also felt a little guilty. So after hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai asked Chi Li the most important thing this time, which was also the purpose of their visit. An family is an old family in the imperial capital. The current head of the family is An Desun, the father of An Zhangwu and An Zhangyong. According to legend, his great-grandfather was an officer in the Beiyang army. After the surrender of Japan, he was one of the first people to enter the imperial capital. After Taizu established the country, he led his troops to surrender, then withdrew from the army and took root in the imperial capital. Looking at Jiang Hai, Chi Li quickly said. Chi Li's hatred for the Yin family was not a joke, so she was very clear about the Yin family situation. Although the Yin family once had the merit of supporting the emperor, there were many people who had the merit of supporting the emperor. At the time, their ancestor was the most powerful, but he was only a colonel, and did not have any real power. In the generation of An Zhangwu's grandfather, they could not live anymore, so they entered the business circle. Therefore, the Yin family was considered to be one of the weaker clans of the previous dynasty. They did not have many members, and there were not many people who were involved in politics. Furthermore, none of them had ever entered the army. When there was no connection between interests, human feelings would gradually fade. Not long after, the Yin family gradually became a business family. Otherwise, the Yin family, who was born and raised in the capital, would not have to spend so much effort to deal with the Qi family, who was an outsider. Not to mention the large families in the country, even some second-rate families in the capital could easily deal with the Qi family. However, because they were born and raised in the capital, even if the Qi family had a great advantage, it would not be easy to deal with the Yin family. If Jiang Hai really did what he did in the United States, and asked Azalina to deal with the Yin family as soon as he came, not to mention whether it could be done. It was estimated that the people who had a grudge against the Yin family, such as Jiang Hai and the Qi family, would be directly monitored. It would be fine if they were killed, but if they were left alive, it would be fine. Wuxia people were particularly united sometimes, especially when others stepped into their small circle. It was hard to say whether Jiang Hai's actions would arouse the thoughts of these people in the capital. At that time, whether they could leave or not would be another matter. After listening to Chi Li's words, the originally delicious beef suddenly became a little worse. Chapter 425. What do you mean? Do you think I'm a mute? Putting down the chopsticks in his hand, the beef that is the most delicious for others is indeed delicious in Jiang Hai's mouth, but Jiang Hai doesn't lack these, so he usually eats freely. It doesn't matter if he eats less, but if he holds this anger in his heart and doesn't let it out, it will kill him. Of course not, we can't suffer in silence. But when she heard Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li spoke first. She now knows that Jiang Hai still doesn't fully trust her. If she stands in the wrong position, Jiang Hai will really leave. Although she is thinking for Jiang Hai, it seems that she has to consider Jiang Hai's inner thoughts. Then what do you think we should do? Looking at Qi Li in front of him, Jiang Hai said with a serious face. Seeing this, Qi Li waved to Master Zhang who was cooking. Master Zhang nodded politely and left first. At this time, although Jiang Hai doesn't fully trust all the people in this room, at least Qi Li does. At least if we want to do it, we have to plan, how to kill him in one blow, how to deal with the next thing, who to find to do it, these are all things we need to consider. Looking at Jiang Hai, Qi Li said with a serious face. Leave this to me, I came here with the boss to do this job. Hearing Qi Li's words, Azalina slowly picked up a piece of beef in front of her, stuffed it into her mouth, and then said to Qi Li with a smile. You? Looking at Azalina, Qi Li couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Originally, she thought that Azalina was Jiang Hai's new lover, or like Penelope, a lawyer's assistant or something like that, but she didn't expect that she would actually say that she wanted to solve it. Let me introduce you, Azalina Vicabrio, former KGB agent, now my bodyguard. Looking at Qi Li's surprised look, Jiang Hai's heart calmed down a little. He picked up a piece of beef and ate it while talking. Excuse me. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but hesitate, but she didn't expect Jiang Hai to have such an expert around him. It seems that Jiang Hai didn't come here casually, he came here prepared. Originally, she thought that Jiang Hai was so angry that he lost his head and directly came to fight with Zhangwu. It seems that he unknowingly received a very good team. The beauty in front of him turned out to be an agent that he only saw in the movies. So amazing. Since we have people, then we also need to prepare. Goodbye, we need to know the time and place of the attack. If possible, we need to uproot the family once and for all. If only 1 or 2 people are caught, the rest will be on guard, then it will be difficult to deal with them. Looking at Azalina in front of her, Qi Li said slowly. Up to you. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shrugged his shoulders. Originally, according to what he said, they should directly break into their house and then exterminate their family. But just like what Qi Li said, they should have done it right. This is not the United States. Here, as a rich man, he has no privileges. The domestic and foreign situations are completely different. In foreign countries, it is the world of the gold standard. Money is everything, especially in Europe and the United States. If you have money, it means that the local government has to rely on you to live. If you have money, it means that the local police are your personal bodyguards. If you have money, it means that you have everything. But in China, no matter how rich a person is, he is actually just a pig raised by the court. They can kill you whenever they want. Lawyers, laws, they have to serve the court, but abroad, they serve the rich. Of course, whether it is at home or abroad, ordinary people have the least human rights. This is very clear. Since there is no way to directly kill the family and directly kill the family, then let Qi Li think of a way. Bang, bang, bang. Just as Qi Li was thinking of a way, the door of their private room suddenly rang. This made Qi Li frown involuntarily. After all, she had ordered not to disturb them unless there is a big matter. Is the restaurant manager tired of his job? How dare he ignore my words? Seeing Qi Li's dissatisfaction, the assistant immediately received the signal and walked to the door leisurely. After opening the door, he looked at the person outside the door unhappily and said coldly, "What's the matter?" Seeing the assistant open the door, the restaurant manager could not help but say a little awkwardly, "Sir, you must see Chairman Chi." "We." Seeing the assistant open the door, the restaurant manager could not help but say a little awkwardly. He naturally knew of Chi Li's orders, but he could not afford to offend the person beside him. "Okay, you don't have to say any more. Sorry, this is a private party, so it is not convenient for us to entertain you. Please feel free to do as you wish." Looking at the tall and thin young man standing beside the manager, the assistant here did not have a good expression. However, the young man ignored the assistant and said directly, "Sorry, your level is not high enough." However, the young man ignored the assistant and said directly. Then, he jumped over the manager and directly pushed the door open. The assistant behind the door was almost pushed to the ground by him. Seeing that this person actually dared to make a move, the manager had already signaled to the security guards in the distance. If this guy dared to make a move, even if he was from the imperial court, they would dare to take him down first. After all, this country still had to maintain harmony on the surface. "Mr. Jiang Hai, hello, my name is Zhu Wen. I am from the National Security Council. I feel that we can talk." However, after this person entered the room, he did not take the next step. Instead, he stood in front of Jiang Hai and said with a serious face. Chapter 426. Tell me what you want. Looking at Jiang Hai's playful eyes, the young man couldn't help but frown. Sure enough, this guy wasn't easy to get along with. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, the young man knew that the imperial court would have to pay a price. However, the imperial court is not his. He just came here to ask Jiang Hai for help. As long as Jiang Hai is willing to help, the imperial court will pay some price. Looking at Jiang Hai in front of him, the young man said calmly. "It seems that the imperial court is not sincere. If I don't know anything, why would I send someone here? Let's talk about it when you think about what you can give me." Jiang Hai really doesn't know how to negotiate, but he is not stupid. It is not good for him to reveal his trump card too early, so he just smiled, then picked up the teacup in front of him. Since ancient times, Wuxia has a saying that the guest should be served with dishes and sent off. The only person here who can be regarded as a guest is this young man. This young man has naturally received professional training, so he naturally knows the reason why Jiang Hai did this, so he didn't say much. He stood up directly, nodded to Jiang Hai, and left the room. He just came here to convey the message of the higher-ups. The specific negotiation depends on Jiang Hai and their higher-ups. "Jiang Hai, do you really want to agree with them?" Seeing this person leave, Chi Li, who was sitting next to Jiang Hai, couldn't help but ask hesitantly. Based on her understanding of the imperial court, it was true that privately cooperating with the imperial court would earn some reputation, but other than reputation, there was nothing else. It was inevitable that they would lose money. In the eyes of these merchants, money was much more useful than reputation. There is no such thing as agreeing or not. Let's see their sincerity. Anyway, my business is not in the country. We will talk about it when the time comes. This person is just a small fry. If I release my goodwill, there will probably be a big shot coming to talk to me tomorrow. This is also one of the opportunities to kill the family. Looking at Chi Li in front of him, Jiang Hai narrowed his eyes and said with a smile. The main purpose of Jiang Hai's coming here is to kill the family. If he makes it clear, the imperial court will naturally help him. Okay. Looking at Jiang Hai's appearance, Chi Li hesitated for a moment, nodded, and then changed the topic. For her, there is nothing that makes her happier than making money through the restaurant. Of course, if Jiang Hai can understand her intentions, it is indeed something that makes her happier than making money through the restaurant. After the meal, Jiang Hai and the others returned to the hotel. As for Chi Li, she went home. Lying on the big bed in the hotel, Jiang Hai scrolled through the two numbers on his phone. Ai Xiaoxi and Feng Yunshen. To be honest, although they hadn't been gone for long, and they kept in touch with each other on the phone and the internet, Jiang Hai missed them a little. After all, they were the only two women in the world who had confirmed their relationship with him. What? Aphrodite? Jiang Hai can only say that Aphrodite was an accident. He really didn't want to touch the girls around him. Now that they are in the capital, to be honest, Jiang Hai misses them even more. But after looking at it for a while, Jiang Hai put down the phone. If it was before he knew about the Yin family's power, Jiang Hai would call them, but now Jiang Hai has to consider more. For example, if they fail, how can they escape? Jiang Hai already regretted bringing Delina, Marion, and Penelope daily, not to mention adding more people. After hesitating for a moment, Jiang Hai patted his head and threw the phone aside. Let's talk about it after the matter here is over. After all, he flew for more than 10 hours and had to adjust to the jet lag. Jiang Hai was also a little tired. The next morning, he didn't get up. Instead, he slept until 10 o'clock before he was awakened by a knock on the door. Wearing pajamas, he walked to the door in a daze. After opening the door, he found that the person who knocked on the door was none other than the staff of the Ministry of State Security who came to see him last night. Behind him, there was a middle-aged man in his 40s who looked very energetic. This middle-aged man was about 1.75 meters tall and looked very decent. He wore a pair of black-rimmed glasses and looked more like a scholar than a lackey of the imperial court. A government official. The first impression he gave was not bad. Hello, Mr. Jiang, we meet again. This is my superior, Mr. Chao Weiqing. He has full authority to talk to you about the topic that we didn't finish last night. Looking at Jiang Hai, who opened the door, the young man here said with a serious face. Yes, please come in. Looking at the two people in front of him, Jiang Hai was stunned for a moment. Then, he smiled and waved his hand, indicating that they could come in. The two people didn't say much and went straight in. They looked around the suite. Although they belong to the court, they usually don't have many opportunities to live in suites of this level. Especially the young man, after walking in, his eyes were still shining. He really didn't know how this Jiang Hai, who is about the same age as him, can live in such a good suite. Why is he still a small staff? But he can already live in such a good suite and become friends with a member of the Dubai royal family. Most importantly, he has such a beautiful wife, Qi Li. Yes, one night is enough for these people to investigate Jiang Hai's background. They all know that Jiang Hai is the supplier of beef to Qi Li's restaurant. At the same time, they also know that Jiang Hai is Qi Li's husband. Take a seat first. Chapter 427. Seeing Jiang Hai curl his lips slightly, the middle-aged man sighed in his heart. In fact, when he heard this condition, he couldn't help but be stunned. This was because he also knew that Jiang Hai was taking the quality route. His beef was mainly sold on the high-end route, not the quantity. 1,000 cows, even 10,000 cows, a cow can be slaughtered for a few hundred pounds of meat. 10,000 cows can be slaughtered for a few million pounds of meat. It was not a small amount, enough for a person to eat for a lifetime. But the problem was that there were 1.3 billion people in Wuxia. Millions of kilograms of beef was nothing in the market. Of course, it was very expensive as a whole. 1 kilogram was sold for 2,400 yuan, so millions of kilograms were worth 12 billion yuan in total. But according to the customs tax, the beef only had to pay more than 10 million yuan in customs tax. It was not easy to ask Jiang Hai to help with a customs tax of more than 10 million yuan. Don't worry. There is a second condition. We can exempt the cheese restaurant from business tax, urban construction tax, and individual income tax. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little impatient, the middle-aged man immediately said the second condition. Hearing this, Jiang Hai frowned more deeply. Because the Western restaurant of the cheese restaurant was built by Qi Li and all the money it earned belonged to her. But it had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He and Qi Li were not really a couple, so it had nothing to do with him. Seeing Jiang Hai frowning more deeply, the middle-aged man panicked. Indeed, Jiang Hai did not lack money for the first benefit. But for the second benefit, Jiang Hai should be very tempted. According to the current business situation of the cheese restaurant, the net profit every day was more than 2 million yuan. This year's turnover was 730 million yuan. According to the tax, the business tax was 5%, the urban construction tax was 7%, which was 12%. Plus the tax of 20%, although there was a reduction, 30% of the total would be tax. 730 million yuan meant 219 million yuan. This would save him a lot of money. Why did Jiang Hai still look reluctant? It was more than 30 million yuan in US dollars. In fact, he didn't know whether the money could be saved or not. Jiang Hai didn't intend to ask for it. It had nothing to do with him. Third, if the cheese restaurant and you have any projects in China in the future, we will give you the green light. Seeing that Jiang Hai was not tempted by the first two conditions, he said the third one. But the third condition made Jiang Hai speechless. His focus was mainly in Boston. What did the projects in China have to do with him? He didn't intend to invest his funds in China. After all, he had seen too many cases where money was wasted. If he put his money in the bank, he could live on the interest. If he put his money in China, what if he was targeted by the second generation? Now, he is still asking the Massachusetts government to increase the tour route. How can this matter be solved so easily when he is back in China? No problem, except for pandas, golden monkeys, and other species unique to our country, everything else is fine, even Siberian tigers and so on. As for plants, except for the mother plant of Dahongpo, everything else is fine, but the premise is that the United States has to accept it. Seeing Jiang Hai put forward the second condition, the man agreed without hesitation. This is also a very simple request. Even some of the forestry department directors of prefecture-level cities can make this decision, let alone people at their level. Listening to the other party agree to two consecutive requests, Jiang Hai was also a little confused. It seems that he thought too much at the beginning. Indeed, the country does not allow some locally preserved species to be brought out. But that is just a general request. If they really want to bring them out, it is not impossible. After all, some of the domestic plant and animal species have no advantage compared to foreign species. For example, the Ujimikan sheep that Jiang Hai had once eaten, which he had wholeheartedly wanted to bring abroad, was compared to the boar goat. Although its meat is more compact and delicious, the amount of meat produced is far less, and the scale can't be expanded because it is more aggressive. Coupled with the geographical conditions of breeding, it is destined that it is impossible to breed them on a large scale abroad. The reason why it is not allowed is to maintain the local livestock industry and maintain stability. If Jiang Hai wants to bring some out to raise, it doesn't matter, let alone people at their level. Except for national treasures that are not allowed, they think that everything else is fine. Using some animals in exchange for Jiang Hai's friendship is too worth it. Hearing the middle-aged man agree to his second condition so readily, Jiang Hai can't help but be a little speechless. In fact, before he mentioned it, he only had these two conditions. The first condition is to let him have a lot of money, and the second condition is to let him fill his stomach, especially after Xiaoye moved into his manor recently. His love for food is getting stronger and stronger, but if he always eats Western food, there will be a time when he is tired of it. Chinese food is better. However, the seasoning for Chinese food is not ordinary. Now that he has the green light, he can make whatever he wants. Third, if something happens to me in the country, the imperial court has to come forward to help me settle it. However, Jiang Hai thought about it. Since the first two conditions are so easy, plus the in-families matter, Jiang Hai decided to add a protective talisman for himself. No problem. Hearing Jiang Hai's third condition, although he didn't know why Jiang Hai added this third condition, the other party still nodded. Chapter 428. The plan can start. Looking at Qi Li in front of him, Jiang Hai said faintly. After contacting the Imperial Court people, the Imperial Court people left first, but before leaving, he gave Jiang Hai his business card. With this, it meant that if Jiang Hai had anything, he could look for him at any time. As for the agreement, the two of them left with one copy each. Shortly after the middle-aged man left, Qi Li and her assistant came over. Everyone had lunch together in the hotel's restaurant, and Jiang Hai said faintly to Qi Li at the dinner table. Have you finished negotiating? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li couldn't help but raise her head and look at him with surprise. Yes, it's been negotiated. The day after tomorrow is the day of Du Feimin's banquet. Big and small people in the capital will definitely go, but the possibility of you being invited is not very high. If the Yin family is invited, then you don't have to care about them. If they are not invited, you can go and leak some information to them. Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai nodded. This time, we must deal with them. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li's eyes were also shining. Indeed, when Du Feimin held a banquet, it was inevitable that the influential people in the capital would go. After all, this was the royal family of the Middle East, the local tycoons of the Middle East. If they could make friends with such people, it would definitely be beneficial for them. Even if they couldn't make much money from them, they could also use the name of the local tycoons of the Middle East to do well in the country. However, these influential people naturally referred to the government, the imperial court, and some super-rich people. For Qi Li and the others, third-rate businessmen with family assets of less than 18 billion yuan, it was not so easy to get into this circle. For businessmen, what was the most important thing? Money? Well, yes, money was the most important thing. In addition to money, the most important thing was connections. If the Yin family got wind of such an opportunity, it was impossible for them not to come. This was also Jiang Hai's bait to catch them, and it was a bait that they had no choice but to bite. Then I'll go and arrange it. What are you going to do in the afternoon? Do you need me to leave her behind to be your guide? Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li nodded to show that she understood. At the same time, she turned on her phone and prepared to fish. But halfway through, she suddenly remembered that Jiang Hai didn't have anything to do. If Delina and the others came to play, Jiang Hai would definitely take them out to play. However, Jiang Hai wasn't very familiar with the imperial capital. Should she arrange a tour guide for him? No need. Shaking his head, Jiang Hai directly rejected Qi Li's kindness. He didn't like this assistant. Oh. Hearing Jiang Hai's rejection, Qi Li was stunned for a moment, then responded softly. It seems that her relationship with Jiang Hai is still very stiff. After that, she didn't speak, lowered her head, and played with her phone. By the way, your restaurants don't have to pay taxes in the future. You don't have to pay customs taxes anymore. This is also one of the deals I made with them. Just when the atmosphere in the private room was a little cold, Jiang Hai said indifferently. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li raised her head in surprise and looked at Jiang Hai. She really didn't expect that Jiang Hai would help her save hundreds of millions in taxes so easily. No, it was more than hundreds of millions. Jiang Hai didn't mention the number of years. Doesn't that mean that as long as my restaurants are open, I don't have to pay taxes? That's not just hundreds of millions, it might be billions, or even tens of billions. Thinking of this, Qi Li's eyes began to shine. She really didn't think that Jiang Hai would give her such a big gift. Of course, she also knew that she wouldn't take all this money for herself. She would definitely take out Jiang Hai's share. Okay, we're done eating. You can go do your work. I want to go out and play. Looking at Qi Li's shining eyes in front of him, Jiang Hai couldn't help but feel a headache. This money grubber is really too much. I hope she doesn't misunderstand anything. Jiang Hai originally agreed based on the principle of not taking advantage of a bastard. Now it seems that Qi Li is thinking too much. Okay, I understand. I'll call Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi to come and accompany you. After all, you're not very familiar with the capital. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Qi Li also stood up and wanted to walk out with a smile on her face. But before she walked out, she stopped and looked at Jiang Hai with a serious face and asked. Hearing her words, not only Jiang Hai, but also Daliana, Marian, and Lily were stunned. Azalina and Penelope were not familiar with Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi. Penelope had never seen them before. Although Azalina had seen them before, she only glanced at them in a hurry. After all, she was a prisoner at that time. She only knew that there were two Huaxia women around Jiang Hai, but other people knew what these two women were up to. Especially Qi Li's assistant. When did her master become so easy to talk to? She even took the initiative to send them to Jiang Hai's side? Forget about them. Before the matter is completed, it's better not to tell them about my news. Otherwise, if something happens, it will be difficult for them. But when he heard Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai shook his head. If he waited until the family was solved, Jiang Hai estimated that there was a 90% chance that he would look for them. After all, they are his first and second women who have confirmed their relationship. They are much more important than Qi Li. Oh, then I understand. Hearing that Jiang Hai didn't intend to look for Feng Yunshan and AI Xiaoxi, although his original intention was to protect them, as long as Jiang Hai didn't look for them, Qi Li's heart was very happy. After everything was arranged, Qi Li left first. She was going to prepare for fishing. As for Jiang Hai, he took Delina, Marian, Azalina, and Penelope together. They sat in the car arranged by the hotel and began to play in the imperial capital. The imperial capital, one of the 4 ancient capitals of Huaxia, has the most world cultural heritage in the world. The history of the city's founding in 3060 gave birth to a large number of scenic spots and historical sites, but speaking of the official history of the imperial capital, it was mainly the Ming and Qing dynasties. Before that, Liao, Jin, and Yuan were all hostile countries of the Song dynasty in the history of Huaxia. They were not recorded in the history books and were not familiar to everyone. The people who were really familiar with the imperial capital were the Ming and Qing dynasties. However, even in the Ming dynasty, the place where the capital was set at the beginning was not the imperial capital, but the southern capital. Later, the king of Yan, Zhu Di, rebelled. He was afraid that he could not control the local people, so he moved the capital back to the imperial capital. Later, the Manchurian Qing entered the pass and established the Qing dynasty. This was another story. After the overthrow of the Qing dynasty, the place where the previous dynasty was located was actually the southern capital, not the imperial capital. The reason why the imperial capital where the current imperial court was located was mainly because when Emperor Taizu first established the country, he did not have any big cities in his hands. Before the establishment of the country, the original city that was set as the capital was Bingcheng. However, because Bingcheng was too cold and too close to the border, there was no strategic buffer zone. Moreover, before the establishment of the country, they had conquered the imperial capital, so they decided to set the imperial capital in the imperial capital. However, these had nothing to do with Jiang Hai. He just came here to play. He had to admit that there were still many places to play in the imperial capital, such as the Forbidden City, the Great Wall, and the Summer Palace. In Jiang Hai's view, other than these 3 places, there were no other places to play. Tianan, Imperial Ancestral Temple, these places were connected to the Forbidden City. Tianan was the entrance of the Forbidden City, so they would visit it together. The Great Wall was outside the imperial capital, and the Summer Palace and the Old Summer Palace were together. So, the main places to play in the imperial capital were these 3 places. Of course, if they wanted to, they could visit the Bird's Nest. After all, that was the place where the Olympic Games were held. The Bird's Nest, the Water Cube, and the National Stadium were together. However, they needed tickets to enter. Jiang Hai did not like it very much. This afternoon, they were going to visit the Forbidden City. The last time Jiang Hai came to the imperial capital, he had visited the Forbidden City before. To be honest, the Forbidden City was much smaller than he had imagined. In the past, when he watched TV, he always felt that the Forbidden City was huge. It was the place where the emperor lived. However, after he really went there, he realized that the Forbidden City was actually not that big. Including the garden at the back, if he walked fast, he could finish looking at it in half an hour. If he looked at everything, it would be more than an hour. Of course, if he was tired and wanted to rest, it would be different. Of course, even if it was not big in Jiang Hai's eyes, the Forbidden City was still the top of the 5 biggest palaces in the world. The Versailles Palace in France, the Buckingham Palace in the United Kingdom, the Kremlin Palace in Russia, and the White House in the United States were all ranked below the Forbidden City. In Jiang Hai's eyes, these things might be boring. But in the eyes of pure Americans like Delina and the others, the Forbidden City was very magical. Even Alina and Penelope were surprised when they walked in. They kept talking about how majestic and magnificent it was. It seemed that the Forbidden City was still very beautiful to foreigners. The group of 5 walked and stopped. Occasionally, they would look at the souvenir stall at the side. They had a lot of fun. On the other side, Qi Li deliberately went to a department store of her company. As mentioned before, the Qi group was now mainly in the real estate business. Of course, they were not developers. They didn't have so much money and connections. Their so-called real estate business was to buy some stores and rent them out. Of course, if they just borrowed chickens to lay eggs, they wouldn't make much money. Therefore, they also had a department store. Although it only had 7 floors, it couldn't even be ranked in the top 20 in the imperial capital. However, the interior was still considered complete, and it was considered the largest department store in the vicinity. Of course, they didn't run these stores. These stores were all rented out. They only relied on the rent to maintain the water, electricity, security, and so on. Today, Qi Li's target was this department store. Because she knew that the person in charge of this department store was related to the Yin family. Although the Qi group was a company controlled by the family, other than the Qi family who had a lot of shares, other people also had a lot of shares. In the company, besides Qi Li's family, the person who owned the second most stocks was none other than Qi Song, Qi Li's eldest uncle, whom Jiang Hai had met before. This time, Qi Li was going to find Qi Song's son, her cousin, Qi Liangkai. Don't forget that this guy was very close to Zhangwu. Last time when they had a face-to-face confrontation, Qi Li directly kicked him out of the Qi group. Although he no longer held a position in the Qi group, he became the general manager of this department store. Although he had no right to speak in the head office, he seemed to have more power. Qi Li came to him just to let him tell Zhangwu the news. He believed that the fish would be hooked. Therefore, when Qi Li walked into this department store, he already knew the news of Qi Li's arrival. As for Qi Li, it was impossible for Qi Liangkai not to hate her, just like how Qi Song hated Qi Li's father. It was Qi Liangkai who brought Qi Liangkai up, but now Qi Liangkai was riding on his head. As for Qi Liangkai, he had always regarded himself as the eldest son of the Qi family. When Qi Li's father died, he should be the one who inherited the company. How could a woman come over and take away the company that should have belonged to him? He refused to accept it and was not happy, so he colluded with Zhangwu later. Now that Qi Li came here, he was a little surprised. According to his subordinates, Qi Li went straight to the area on the second floor and began to pick up evening gowns, which made him even more confused. With doubts in his heart, he couldn't help walking out of his office and taking the elevator to the second floor. He wanted to see what Qi Li was going to do. When he walked over, he realized that there were quite a few people gathered outside the shop. There were shop assistants nearby, as well as people who were shopping. Regardless of whether they were men or women, they were all looking into the shop from time to time. Their eyes were filled with admiration, envy, and jealousy. When he walked in, he couldn't help but feel his eyes lit up. At this time, he saw Qi Li standing in the middle of the store. However, at this time, she finally changed out of her unchanged women's suit. At this time, she was wearing a beige tulle top and a long black skirt with a long slit. The simple black and white colors made her look very noble. If she was a queen in the past, she was now an empress. Her tall figure and black skirt swayed from time to time, revealing her slender and long white legs under the skirt. Just her legs alone were estimated to be enough for people to play with for a few years. Her upper body was full, and the clothes were gently stretched out. Through the gap in the middle of the shirt, one could see a rift valley. Although it was not particularly grand, it was definitely not small. It was just right. In addition, her hair was tied up at the back of her head. Although the clothes on her body were simple, they were large and shining brightly. Coupled with an expensive handbag, when she stood there, she really attracted everyone's attention. Looking at Qi Li in front of him, a trace of greed flashed in Qi Liangcai's eyes. Such a beautiful woman, such a noble woman, if he could have her, it would be cool just thinking about it. However, he knew that it was impossible. Because they were cousins. However, if they worked well in the future, it was not completely impossible. But now, he had to suppress this desire. Taking a deep breath, Qi Liangcai put on a smile on his face and walked over. Shaoli, how do you have time to shop here? Haven't you been watching your restaurant recently? Looking at Qi Liangcai said with a smile. Hearing his words, the security guards and the staff who were originally watching quietly dispersed. Of course, the customers did not bother him. They continued to stand there and look at Qi Li's figure. She was really too beautiful. Yes, I don't have much time, but Jiang Hai is back. No matter how busy I am, I have to dress up well. Looking at herself in the mirror, Qi Li couldn't help but chuckle. However, her words were still cold and arrogant as she said to Qi Liangcai. Jiang Hai is back? Why did he come back? Hearing Qi Li's words, Qi Liangcai narrowed his eyes. He did not have a good impression of Jiang Hai. It's none of your business. Help me check it out. How about it? Why don't I wear this? After saying coldly to Qi Liangcai, Qi Li looked at the assistant beside her and asked her. At the same time, she kept turning in circles smugly. No one else can wear this. Really? Boss, if you wear this, you must let those people know that you are the most beautiful. Whether it is the Middle East nouveau riche or the top businessmen, they will all bow down to you. At that time, let's see how Jiang Hai dares to go out and flirt with other women. Hearing Qi Li's words, the assistant also said with a smile. Hearing her words, Qi Li smiled softly and then turned in front of the mirror proudly. As for Qi Liangcai, who was standing behind them, after hearing the assistant's words, his eyelids twitched unconsciously. The Middle East nouveau riche, the top businessmen? These two words were too sensitive for him, but he would not ask Qi Li, because he knew that she would not tell him even if he asked. So, he just watched Qi Li finish her smugness and change her clothes. She was so satisfied with this suit that she naturally bought it. After watching Qi Li leave happily, Qi Liangcai also made a phone call. The person on the other end of the phone was Zhangwu. After Zhangwu heard Qi Liangcai's words, he could not help but frown. Obviously, he was also very sensitive to these two titles. He asked his brother to check it and got a message. Everyone knew that the current imperial court was lacking oil. Wuxia had always said that it had vast territory and abundant resources since ancient times. But in fact, the older people understood that this meant that perhaps in the era of cold weapons, Wuxia's territory and population were the guarantee of hegemony. However, in the era of hot weapons, Wuxia could not do it because of the lack of strategic resources. Oil was pitifully little. Strategic minerals such as copper were also pitifully little in this era where steel was the bone and oil was the blood. Wuxia's resources really had nothing to do with vast territory and abundant resources. For the sake of oil, Wuxia valued Du Feimin more than the average country's leaders. This villa was specially rented for Du Feimin. Naturally, the vicinity was also the focus of the defense of the sea, land, and air forces. When Jiang Hai's car arrived here, there was a special gate to check if there were any dangerous items in the car. Even the large wrench prepared in the trunk was taken out. No weapons were allowed to be in the car. After the check, Jiang Hai and Qi Li also drove inside. As soon as they arrived at the parking lot, Qi Li could not help but be stunned. Because in her opinion, for such a high-end cocktail party, the guests would naturally drive good cars. Not to mention the cocktail parties of the Middle East tycoons that she had heard of before, just for the cocktail parties of people like her, the parking lot outside was filled with Rolls-Royces. Bentleys were even worse than dogs, and they didn't even dare to open their mouths when driving a broken Mercedes. But what was going on now? This hall was about 5,000 square meters. In the middle was a long table with fruits and cold dishes. The four corners also had different kinds of food. One of the corners was a bar with 3 bartenders working hard to mix drinks. It was an excellent place to create an atmosphere. On the other side, there was a barbecue chef grilling skewers. Perhaps only the people from the new province knew how much the Arabians liked to eat barbecue. On the huge skewer, there were all kinds of barbecue skewers. Several Arabian chefs were working hard to grill the meat. Many young people gathered there. They were also very interested in the food. Then, in the other 2 corners, one was baking cakes and bread on the spot, and the other was making teppanyaki. It could be said that Du Feimin's banquet wasn't as simple as just drinking. He seemed to be very interested in eating. After Qi Li walked into the hall, she felt that her eyes weren't enough. This was because at this time, there were almost 100 people gathered in the hall. These people were both men and women. Some were gathered together, while others were looking for food. Among them, there were many people in their 40s and 50s. Qi Li felt that they were familiar, but she was very sure that she didn't know them. In her opinion, there was only one possibility, which was that she had seen them on TV before. In addition, there were some people that she had only heard of before. These people were the top tycoons in the capital's business circle. Although there weren't any particularly famous people on the surface, these people's personal wealth was definitely more than 20 billion yuan. Although it wasn't much more than Qi Li's family wealth, don't forget that Qi Li's wealth was in the family. The money mainly didn't belong to her, but to her mother and her 2 younger sisters. How much could her family wealth be? Moreover, 10 billion yuan was actually just a starting point in the circle of these tycoons. Only those with more than 1 million yuan were considered second class. Only those with more than 2 million yuan or even 30 billion yuan could touch the edge of the top circle. Usually, no matter if these people attended any cocktail party that Qi Li and the others could attend, they would definitely be the finale. But at this time, they were just some small side characters, nothing more. Hey! Niece Qi, why are you here? Just when Qi Li felt that her eyes weren't enough, a slightly unexpected voice came from the side. Then, a middle-aged man who looked to be in his 50s or 60s with a balding head and a beer belly came over. There was a trace of surprise and doubt in his eyes. Hey! Uncle Zhou, you're here too. Let me introduce you. This is my husband, Jiang Hai. This is Uncle Zhou, Zhou Yu, who is now the director of the Ministry of Land and Resources. Looking at the middle-aged man, Qi Li smiled and immediately introduced him. At the same time, she hinted at Jiang Hai with her eyes. In fact, Jiang Hai had heard of this person before, but not from Qi Li, but from Qi Li's mother. This person should be the protector of the Qi family in the capital. This person was also from the military. He had once been saved by Qi Li's father. Later on, when he arrived at the capital, he sought refuge with him. That was how the Qi family became what it was today. After all, this person came from the army and was very loyal. If it wasn't for him, the Qi family might have been finished when Qi Li's father died. Later, it was said that he had always wanted his son to marry Qi Li, but with Jiang Hai, this matter was finally left unsettled. "You're Mr. Zhou?" "Oh, hello, I've heard of you. Niece Qi is a good person. You must be good to her." Hearing Qi Li's words, Zhou Yu also smiled and took the initiative to stretch out his hand. After shaking hands with Jiang Hai, he said with a serious face, Sure." Hearing his words, what can Jiang Hai say? My marriage with Qi Li is just a fake one. Stop fooling around. At this time, he has to give some face to the other party. Although it is a little awkward, Jiang Hai can only say with a smile, Dad, you're here, hey? Xiao Li is also here. I originally wanted to call you and invite you to come together, but my dad said that he was afraid that you would be uncomfortable if you came, so I didn't call. This is. Just as the two shook hands, another voice came, and then a man who looked a little like Zhou Yu, but much younger, came over. This man was more than 1.8 meters tall and his body was very well proportioned. The most important thing was that his eyes were bright and his body looked very strong. He was wearing a formal suit and was holding 2 glasses of mixed wine in his hands. He was a sunny and handsome man. Along the way, he attracted a lot of attention, but when he saw Qi Li, his eyes began to shine. Chapter 432. This is my husband, Jiang Hai. This is Zhou Xian, Uncle Zhou Yu's son. Looking at the handsome young man walking over, Qi Li's face was slightly embarrassed. Speaking of which, Zhou Xian was quite good in this circle. Perhaps it was because his father was from the military, so he did not have the habit of spoiling his son. Since young, Zhou Xian did not have a bad reputation like those second generations. Instead, he had a good reputation. He had been good at his studies since elementary school. At the same time, he was not bad looking. He also had sports talents, basketball and football. When he was in university, he even participated in Cuba and was the team's #1 scorer. However, when he got older, he did not go to the CBA to develop his career. There was nothing bad about his private life. He did not smoke, nor was he debauched. He also did not have any bad side effects. Now, he was working in the Ministry of Land. Although he was only a small staff member, with his father's connections, no one dared to look down on him or exclude him. When he had nothing to do, his hobby was to exercise. He ran every morning, ran at night, and played basketball in the afternoon after work. His life was very healthy. This was what Zhou Yu was most proud of in this circle. His son did not have to worry about anything. Qi Li and he met in high school. At that time, Qi Li's father was already relying on Zhou Yu. The relationship between the two families was quite good. From the first time he saw Qi Li, Zhou Xian liked Qi Li. However, Qi Li did not like such a hypocrite. After going to university, Qi Li went abroad and met in Changwu. When she came back, Zhou Xian was very sad. However, with Zhou Yu's character, he would not do anything to steal his love. Therefore, he could not do anything when he saw his son in pain. Later, after the change in the Qi family, he thought it was an opportunity to let Qi Li marry his son. Unfortunately, Qi Li's mother would definitely not let her family's foundation be taken advantage of by others. This was because she knew that although Zhou Yu and Zhou Xian were good people, once she married into their family, Zhou Xian would have the final say. At that time, it would only be a matter of time before the Qi family changed its name to the Zhou family. That was why they chose Jiang Hai, who had no chance. Jiang Hai was a good person. He didn't have any power or background. Furthermore, he knew everything about him. He wasn't a bad person. Even if she could be used to shut the mouths of the Qi Li family members, she had no ambition. Even if she had a child with Qi Li in the future, even if the child's surname was Jiang, wouldn't it be up to them to educate the child? Jiang Hai was basically a bad guy, he didn't have any right to speak. It could be seen that the person who controlled Jiang Hai's fate was actually Qi Li's mother. One had to admit that the older, the wiser. Oh, hello. My name is Zhou Xian. Any one of the people inside would have to stomp their feet and walk around unsteadily on the outside. What did she say now? In order to accompany Jiang Hai, she didn't want to get to know the people here? Did this Qi Li become stupid after marriage? Shaoli, you should go and get to know some people. This place is only so big. Brother Jiang Hai won't get lost, right? Seeing Qi Li's determined look, Zhou Xian shook his wrist and said with a serious face even though he had just suffered a loss. At the same time, he looked at Jiang Hai with a red gaze. What was a cowraiser doing here? Hey, Mr. Jiang, you're here. Why are you only here now? However, before he could finish speaking, he was interrupted by someone. Zhou Xian couldn't help but turn around to look at the source of the voice with some anger. In the end, he found that the person who interrupted him was about the same age as his father. At this time, he was running toward Jiang Hai with a smile. It was obvious that he attached great importance to Jiang Hai. Although Zhou Xian didn't know who this person was, Zhou Yu did. When he saw this person coming over, he subconsciously stood at attention. Oh, you just came over. Where's Du Feimin? Looking at this person, Jiang Hai also smiled. This person was no stranger to Jiang Hai because this person was the person in charge who had talked to him about persuading Du Feimin that day. Jiang Hai didn't know what this person's job was. Jiang Hai also didn't know what this person's position was. However, looking at Zhou Yu's appearance, it was clear that this person's rank was definitely not low. Seeing this person walk over quickly, Jiang Hai also smiled and greeted him. Mr. Mactum is in the room discussing with the representatives of the imperial court. When will you? This person looked at Jiang Hai and spoke very carefully. After all, the relationship between Jiang Hai and Du Feimin was one of their bargaining chips. Then let's talk about it later. I'm a little hungry. I'm going to get some food. Looking at the food around him, Jiang Hai smiled and took the initiative to speak. Hearing this person smiled and tactfully retreated. However, before he left, he saw Zhou Yu standing to the side. Minister Qin, hello. Looking at the person in front of him, Zhou Yu's face was filled with smiles as he spoke modestly. Oh, hello. You are. Zhou Yu recognized this middle-aged man, but the middle-aged man didn't recognize him, so he asked with some confusion. My name is Zhou Yu. I'm from the Ministry of Land and Resources. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, Zhou Yu immediately introduced himself. Oh, old Zhang's subordinate. You know Mr. Zhang? Then you've got it right. Hearing his introduction, this person couldn't help but smile and pat his head. Then, he looked at Jiang Hai and joked with him with a smile. Although he was half joking, Zhou Yu clearly heard some things from this person's words. For example, this Jiang Hai was definitely not simple. Not only did he know Minister Qin, but it seemed that Minister Qin had a favor to ask of him. At the same time, the most important thing was that Du Feimin, who he just mentioned, was very likely to be the protagonist of this banquet. Thinking of this, a thin layer of sweat appeared on Zhou Yu's forehead. Who exactly was this Jiang Hai? Was he really a guy with nothing to do? Or was he, as he said, a cattle farmer? When did a cattle farmer become friends with a rich man from the Middle East, and what they said could reach the heavens? Wasn't this bullshit? Dad? After joking around with Zhou Yu, Minister Qin left. As for Zhou Xian, he walked over to Zhou Yu, who was still in a daze, and softly called out to him. Hearing his son's words, Zhou Yu recovered from his shock. This Jiang Hai is definitely not an ordinary person. You just offended him. You'd better leave first. Pulling his puzzled son over, Zhou Yu leaned over and whispered in his ear. Hearing his father's words, Zhou Xian felt helpless, regretful, jealous, and scared. He was helpless because he knew that if Jiang Hai's identity was really not simple, then it would never be possible for him and Qi Li. He regretted it because he was blinded by his jealousy and anger. Why did he offend Jiang Hai? He was jealous because he didn't know what kind of luck this guy had. He actually had Minister Qin backing him up. Although Minister Qin did not know them, the father and son knew him. He was the deputy minister of the Ministry of State Security. Was that a joke? He was scared because he was really scared that Jiang Hai would deal with him. So after hearing Zhou Yu's words, he hesitated for a moment and quickly left. Although it was pitiful to lose this opportunity, he had to be alive. However, it was obvious that Zhou Xian was thinking too much because Jiang Hai really did not have the intention to deal with him at this time. Of course, if he kept appearing in front of him, then it would be hard to say. After meeting with Minister Qin, Jiang Hai went to the front of the restaurant and prepared to start sweeping the goods. When others came to such a banquet, talking was the most important thing, but for Jiang Hai, eating was the most important thing. One had to admit that Du Feimin was very rich, and the people of the imperial court were very sincere. Although this banquet was held in the name of Du Feimin, the ingredients were truly the best ingredients in the country. Oh no, it could be said that they were the best ingredients in the world. In the long and cold dining hall, there were all kinds of food. The most eye-catching was the various kinds of sashimi. Bluefin tuna sashimi. The whole tuna looked no smaller than the ones in Jiang Hai's manor. The head and tail were still intact, but the meat on the body had been sliced into small thin slices, folded in half, and placed in the middle of the fish. Next to the tuna, there were lobster sashimi, Arctic scallop sashimi, mullet roe, sturgeon roe, handheld sushi, and so on. At a glance, it really made people feel a little cold. Because Jiang Hai didn't eat raw food, no matter how valuable these things were, he didn't care about them. In addition to these sashimi and sushi, there were chocolate waterfalls, various fruit plates, cold dishes, sausages, and so on in front of him. Well, in fact, Jiang Hai didn't know much. He wasn't very clear about the specific things here. There were many things he hadn't seen before, but it didn't matter as long as they were delicious. So he walked along the table and ate. As he ate, a figure blocked his way. "Hey, I'm still looking for you. Brother, you're really late." Looking up, Jiang Hai saw Du Feimin's face. At this time, the Arabian royal was still wearing the same white robe as Jiang Hai saw him. Seeing Jiang Hai, he couldn't help but smile and pat Jiang Hai's shoulder enthusiastically. Jiang Hai was a little confused about his attitude, because the relationship between the two wasn't so close. They only had a relationship of buying and selling, and they had only met 3 times. His enthusiasm now made Jiang Hai a little confused. "Am I late?" "It's okay. I'm not here to look for someone. I'm here to eat." While stuffing some Goliath ham into his mouth, Jiang Hai said vaguely. No matter what he was planning, he would just go along with it. "I can see that you are indeed different, but you didn't eat the best food here." Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feimin led Jiang Hai to a pile of sashimi. "Oh. Du Feimin, I don't eat raw things, so forget about the sashimi. Besides, there are also bluefin golden spears in my manor." Waving his hand, Jiang Hai indicated that Du Feimin didn't need to introduce him. He was indeed not used to eating raw things. "Hey, brother, don't worry, I won't cheat you. Come and have a taste. If you don't like it, then forget it. Besides, I won't let you eat bluefin." However, when Du Feimin heard Jiang Hai's words, he shook his head and mysteriously led him to the front of a sashimi. This sashimi wasn't like the bluefin or lobster beside it. It didn't have a lobster head or a fish head to let people know what it was at first glance. Sigh, I originally wanted to bring some back to raise, but it looks like it's impossible. Hearing Du Feimin's words, Jiang Hai sighed. "It's possible to import it. This thing can be found everywhere, both in the country and abroad. However, there is a problem. That is, there are too few people who can make this thing. If Jiang Hai eats this thing, the gains won't make up for the losses. Sigh, this is nothing. This is only ranked in the top 10 of today's food. It's not even in the top 10. Let's go, I'll take you to eat something good. Hearing Jiang Hai's words, Du Feynman smiled, then took the initiative to bring Jiang Hai to the teppanyaki. Seeing Du Feynman bring Jiang Hai over, the chef who was cooking couldn't help but nod. Then, he took out a plate of freshly made fried fish and handed it over. Looking at this plate of fried fish, many people who were just wandering nearby stopped. They looked at the fish in front of them in surprise, because these fish weren't very famous to foreigners. However, to the people in the country, this fish was actually a real ingredient with a sky-high price. Come, try it. Actually, I heard that this kind of fish is best braised, but I don't like it. It's better this way. Dragging Jiang Hai along, Du Feynman arrived in front of the counter, picked up a fork, and began to eat. Jiang Hai also picked up a fish and put it in his mouth. In an instant, a freshness that was different from the blowfish filled his mouth. Once spiritual energy appeared, everything would have to bow down. Looks like I'm going to build a river in the manor. After thinking for a while, Jiang Hai muttered in his heart. Originally, he wanted to make a freshwater river because he wanted to eat eels, so he had to breed them himself. But this was just an idea. After all, it was impossible for him to make a river just to eat eels. It would cost a lot of money. Although Jiang Hai was not short of money, he didn't need to waste too much money. After all, no one ate eels in Boston. Foreigners didn't eat eels. Jiang Hai remembered watching a program about food. Wuxia and French chefs competed. They chose ingredients for each other. As a result, after the French got the eels, they didn't know how to cook them. Western food was different from place to place. But if the first Western food was French and Italian, even the French chefs didn't know how to cook eels. What kind of market would there be in the United States? Therefore, it was not Jiang Hai's style to only go out and not go in. But now it seemed that it was a good idea to build a river. He could raise some freshwater, very valuable fish and sell them to Chile. Thinking about it, once the Yangtze River grenadier fish was launched in the restaurant, it was estimated that the price could be increased many times. Moreover, there was no need to build a river, divert water, or pump water. There were many small rivers in the Boston area. He could just draw one over. If he didn't want to draw water, he could dig a river himself. The underground water was also quite rich. How much would it cost to dig a river? Jiang Hai didn't care about this. After memorizing the scientific name of the long-jawed swordfish in his mind, Jiang Hai began to focus his attention on other things. Not to mention, when he looked at it, he really saw a cooked fish. This fish looks a bit like the American red fish, but it's not quite the same. He picked up a piece and took a bite. Jiang Hai couldn't help but nod. The taste of this fish is also good. This is a large yellow croaker. Recently, it's very expensive. The molded ones are sold for nearly 1,000 yuan per catty, and the smaller ones are sold for about 800 yuan. Seeing that Jiang Hai seemed to be very satisfied, Qi Li hurriedly said, "This is not bad, I can raise it." Hearing Qi Li's words, Jiang Hai was shocked. To be honest, the taste of yellow croaker was better than the average American red fish, but it was almost the same as the American red fish raised by Jiang Hai, or even slightly worse. However, no matter how good the American red fish was, it only sold for 60 yuan per catty in China. In the United States, it was about $10 per catty, which was much more expensive than cod. However, this yellow croaker, which was also a member of the family Cyprinidae, could be sold for 10 times the price of the American red fish. Again, Jiang Hai could raise any fish, so he couldn't help but be tempted. If Jiang Hai wanted to raise 1,000,000 of them, other people would only be able to raise them up to 8 ounces in a year. However, Jiang Hai would have no problem raising them up to 2 caddies. 1 caddy was $80, 2 caddies would be $160. 1 million of them would be $160. What if he raised 2 million fish, or 3 million fish? In the past, Jiang Hai had always thought that his main source of income was on land. This was because beef was very valuable, but now his cattle had almost reached their limit. Therefore, he had to think of other ways to earn money. The fish in the sea were very good. If he could raise these fish, or even raise bluefin fishes, just supplying them to Japan and Wuxia would be enough for him to earn as much as he did on land. Now that he thought about it, he had no choice but to choose the American red fish because there were not many types of fish sold in the United States. They had to ensure their own species characteristics and could not casually introduce foreign species. What if one day, these fish were worthless, just like the Asian carp now? Who could they go to cry to? Looking at the food in front of him, Jiang Hai's mind was spinning. Originally, when he asked Minister Qin to import domestic species, Jiang Hai's first thought was goats, pigs, and the like. Now, it seemed that he was stupid. Even if he wanted to import, he had to import these things. He was really too naive back then. The taste of this fish is indeed not bad, but because it has too many bones, I only ranked it 10th among today's ingredients. Let's go, I'll bring you to the 9th place. After patting Jiang Hai, Du Feimin continued to bring Jiang Hai to the barbecue area in the distance. The barbecue chef here was brought over by Du Feimin from Arabia, and the ingredients were also brought over by him from Arabia. This is today's 9th delicacy, camel hump. After bringing Jiang Hai here, a waiter respectfully took 3 skewers of meat from the grill and placed them on a plate. Then, he passed them to Jiang Hai, Qi Li, and Du Feimin. Camel hump? Looking at the meat in front of him, Jiang Hai hesitated for a moment. He indeed knew that Arabian barbecue was the best. Speaking of which, Arabian barbecue was the best in the world. It was not a joke, but camel hump, he knew that this thing was edible. In the ancient Manchu and Han imperial banquets, the first of the 8 treasures was camel hump. However, to be honest, when Jiang Hai imagined the appearance of camel hump, he really did not feel like eating it. Seeing that Jiang Hai was a little hesitant, Du Feimin took a bite first and then said with a smile, "Try it, it's very good." Seeing that Du Feimin had eaten, Jiang Hai also took a bite after hesitating for a moment. However, other than the resistance in his heart, when the camel hump entered his mouth, Jiang Hai's eyes could not help but light up. This meat was indeed very delicious. Camel hump was the place where camels stored energy, nutrients, and water. There were no bones here, only meat and fat. However, due to the constant storage of water throughout the year, the lean meat here naturally had the effect of tenderness and powder. The meat was very soft. The fat on the outside, after being roasted, turned into oil, but it was not greasy. In ancient times, some aristocrats liked to eat this thing very much. Of course, there were very few people who ate this thing now. After all, not many people raised camels. Camel hump was rich in protein, fat, calcium, scale, iron, vitamin A, B1, B2, and niacin. The gelatinous fat in the meat was also known as hump oil. It was sweet and non-toxic. It had the effect of moisturizing dryness, cooling the wind, promoting blood circulation, and eliminating germs. It was a rare delicacy. Jiang Hai was very satisfied with this meat. However, he did not intend to raise camels. It was not easy to raise them. Most importantly, Jiang Hai did not lack meat. This is the 9th one, and the one I ranked second is the Kobe beef. However, your beef is not worse than this one, so I guess you have long been tired of eating it. Looking at Jiang Hai's satisfied expression, Du Feimin smiled and pointed to another row of meat skewers. He specially went to Japan to buy this meat. The price was not cheap. However, although eating this kind of beef was very normal for Jiang Hai, he still made a skewer and ate it. He had never eaten Kobe beef before. He wanted to try it and see if it tasted good. Generally speaking, it tasted similar to his own beef. However, there were some subtle differences. After all, it was not the same breed of beef. However, the texture was almost the same. Of course, the taste was far worse, because one was made by Jiang Hai, and the other was made by a chef. However, compared to Qi Li's restaurant, the taste was not much different. Qi Li also ate a piece and nodded on the surface. However, in her heart, she had already made up her mind. She must tie Jiang Hai, not only for him, but also for his cows. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.